Chapter 31. Everyone knew that this was the first of the 5 great inner disciples, Ji Jingcheng. It was rumored that Ji Jingcheng had been practicing swordsmanship since he was a child, and his swordsmanship was the best among the inner disciples. A year ago, he had challenged a core disciple. Although he did not win, he did not lose either. It was clear that he was the first of the 5 great inner disciples. Ji Jingcheng only looked at the two of them with a calm and unperturbed expression. This time, the top 3 inner disciples had gathered here, and it seemed that there would be a fierce battle. Soon, the Shusha group made a decision to bring forward the champion battle. Chu Yang, now no one can save you. Oyu Junshuang sneered and said, 3 moves, if I can't beat you in 3 moves, I will turn around and leave. Chu Yang showed 3 fingers. Oyu Junshuang's face suddenly turned ashen. Chu Yang was clearly humiliating him. Yes, that's right, beat him up. What's so great about the 5 great inner disciples? Zhong Hao shouted from below. You are courting death. Oyu Junshuang coldly said, Today, I will break all your bones and let you know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is. Oyu Junshuang was burning with anger. His whole body's true qi was boiling, and the friction in the air made hissing sounds. His strength was at the late 7th level of the primitive martial realm. He punched, and suddenly, the temperature of the entire arena seemed to drop by several degrees. This was Oyu Junshuang's famous cold ice fist. Once it was used, it could even directly freeze a person. Endless cold wind instantly wrapped Chu Yang in it and wanted to freeze him. Chu Yang shouted loudly. He stamped his foot, and his figure rushed towards Oyu Junshuang. He chopped out a move of stormy waves. The cold ice fist was casually scattered by him, and rushed straight ahead. How high the sky is and how deep the earth is, you want to teach me a lesson? Chu Yang sneered and shot out his palm. Bang! An ordinary palm directly hit Oyu Junshuang's face. Pfff. Oyu Junshuang spat out a mouthful of blood. Several of his teeth had been pulled out by Chu Yang. You! Oyu Junshuang looked at Chu Yang in disbelief, but Chu Yang didn't have any intention of stopping, and fiercely kicked out. Bang! Oyu Junshuang was sent flying into the air by Chu Yang's kick. The instant he landed, Chu Yang's palm brought along the sound of billowing waves, as if it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Bringing along an unparalleled terrifying power, it ruthlessly bombarded Oyu Junshuang's body. Hong! Oyu Junshuang fiercely fell out of the stage. Several of his ribs were broken, and he fainted. Many of the surrounding disciples couldn't help but shiver as they swallowed their saliva. Another one of the 5 great inner disciples had been seriously injured. Including the previous 2, Chu Yang had already defeated 3 of the 5 great inner disciples using only the rippling wave palm. Except for the head of the 5 great inner disciples, Ji Jingcheng, and another female disciple, Qinglian, the rest were not Chu Yang's match. Now that Oyu Junshuang had been seriously injured and fainted, it was clear that the champion would only be Chu Yang and Ji Jingcheng. Chu Yang is actually so powerful. Oyu Junshuang, who is at the late 7th level of the origin martial realm, was actually easily defeated by him. It's a pity that he is too ruthless. I don't know if it will be a blessing or a curse when he grows up in the future, for such a disciple to appear in our Coiling Dragon Martial Institution. Of course, it is our Coiling Dragon Martial Institution's fortune. The more geniuses we have, the stronger our Coiling Dragon Martial Institution will be. The deacons in the deacons' seating area were also discussing. I won't take advantage of you, I'll wait for you to rest well, Ji Jingcheng indifferently said. The strength that Chu Yang had displayed made him restless and eager to compete with him. Chapter 32. Good, straightforward. Ji Jingcheng nodded his head and flew onto the stage. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the two of them. This was the most important fight in the inner college tournament. Whoever won would be the champion and would immediately become a core disciple. Then I won't be polite. Ji Jingcheng brandished his sword and pointed at Chu Yang. Show me your sword. I know your martial spirit is a sword martial spirit. Let me see how amazing the younger brother of the legendary Chu Fei of the martial institution is. Chu Yang's elder brother, Chu Fei, was a legend of the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution. Sword martial spirit. Right, Chu Yang's martial spirit is a sword martial spirit. Many of the disciples of the martial courtyard suddenly remembered this. Sword martial spirit, he should be the most proficient in sword arts. He is proficient in sword arts, but just now, he used the wave palm to sweep all his opponents and enter the finals. It is truly unimaginable. Strong, too strong. Not only were the disciples of the martial institution amazed, even the deacons at the deacons' table were astonished. They had just remembered this. Deacon Zhong's eyes flashed with a trace of horror. His disciple, Yi Tianhao, was far from Chu Yang's level. His previous words and actions were simply ridiculous. Now that he recalled it, he could not help but blush. Do Antai's face also flashed with a trace of fear. Previously, when he wanted to kill Chu Yang's aura suddenly burst out. It should be an extremely terrifying sword art. Perhaps, he would have died under Chu Yang's sword. He finally understood why Zhao Meng did not hesitate to bully the weak. He was determined to kill Chu Yang. This kid was indeed too amazing. Brother Chu, your son is not simple. I can't see through him. Nangong Ying, the dean of the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution, was at the center of the deacon's table. His eyes were shining as he looked at Chu Yang. His eyes revealed a trace of horror. Li Yu, who was beside him, curled her lips and said, "See through him? Nangong Ying, you think too highly of yourself. He is not someone you can measure." Boom. Because of Li Yu's words, the entire honor guard area was shaken. Many of the honor guards were shaken, and their auras surged, causing the air to tremble. With a swoosh, all eyes fell on Li Yu. Even Nangong Ying looked at Li Yu in shock because Li Yu's words were too shocking. Li Yu was a proud person, but his opinions had always hit the nail on the head. Furthermore, he was extremely vicious and accurate, and no one in the martial courtyard could compare to him. Between Nangong Ying and Li Yu was actually stronger. Don't look at me like that. I'm just telling the truth. Li Yu crossed his arms and closed his eyes. When this little sheep came to the martial scripture pavilion last month, he comprehended the great thousand-leaf hands in an instant. I'm not too sure if he had cultivated it to the minor accomplishment stage or the ascension stage. Great thousand-leaf hands. The great thousand-leaf hands had achieved a small success in the blink of an eye. In fact, it might even have reached the next level. It exploded. In an instant, the entire honor guard area was in an uproar. Great thousand-leaf hands, how was this possible? The great thousand-leaf hands was the only copy of the Coiling Dragon Martial Courtyard, and it was extremely profound. All the honor guards in the Coiling Dragon Martial Courtyard had tried to cultivate it, but they didn't comprehend much. The great thousand-leaf hands that they cultivated didn't have much power. Let alone minor accomplishment, they couldn't even reach the initial glimpse of the door. But now, Li Yu actually said that the little sheep that everyone in the martial courtyard knew, Chu Yang, had actually cultivated it to minor accomplishment in an instant. If this was the case, what kind of shocking talent was this? Could this little sheep be another Chu Fei? Perhaps he was even more shocking. The great thousand-leaf hands Chu Fei might not be able to achieve this, but how was this possible? Chapter 33. Brother Li, did you see it with your own eyes? Nangong Ying couldn't believe it. He couldn't help but look at Li Yu. Li Yu curled her lips again and thought to herself, you guys are reacting like this now. If I tell you what happened that day, I'm afraid you guys will go crazy. What do you think? Li Yu suddenly laughed. Nangong Ying, why do you think I bet with you? His gaze fell on Chu Yang, but he continued, Deacon Zhong, Deacon Do, and Deacon Zhao, don't forget about the bet, especially Deacon Zhao. You said you'll get 3 azure dragon pills, don't forget. This bastard, no wonder he dared to make such a big bet with me and tried to provoke me. Nangong Xiao instantly understood, but he felt a toothache. However, the one with the biggest reaction was Deacon Zhao, Zhao Du, whom Li Yu mentioned. Zhao Du's expression had already changed. The azure dragon pellet couldn't be passed down to outsiders, but he was greedy for Li Yu's treasure, and he was certain that the little sheep would lose without a doubt. On top of that, Li Yu had chosen the perfect time to implicate him when she was gambling with the deacons. If this Chu Yang becomes the next Chu Fei, He'll definitely become a great enemy of the Zhao family, a hidden danger. Zhao Du's killing intent surged, but he was afraid of being discovered, so he closed his eyes. Deacon Li, rest assured, the Zhao family still has the courage to do so. As for what he was thinking, the deacons could more or less guess. Their hearts were probably dripping blood, although Zhao Du restrained himself well. Brother Chu, don't forget that little sheep is your son. As soon as Li Yu opened her mouth, Chu Yunlong's mouth twitched. His expression was very interesting, and his eyes seemed to shoot fire. Especially when the deacons looked at him strangely. You don't even know your own son? Are you still a father? That damn brat, he even dares to trick me. Chu Yunlong gnashed his teeth. For the first time, he felt that his son was extremely hateful. Brother Chu, don't look like that. Li Yu teased, little sheep didn't tell you for your own good. Otherwise, you'll end up like me, feeling like you're nothing and doubting your life. You'll feel like you've been living like a dog all your life. You'll want to find a piece of tofu and kill yourself immediately. As he spoke, he couldn't help but recall Chu Yang's shocking scenes. He suddenly cursed, motherfucker, this damned little sheep. Now every time I see him, I want to take a detour. It makes me feel so inferior. Inferiority. Nangong Ying and the others were speechless for a while. Such words actually came out from Li Yu's mouth. One must know that this old brat's eyes were usually very high, and even they were nothing in his eyes. He simply looked down on them, not to mention the martial courtyard's disciples. None of them could enter his eyes. But today was really a rare occasion. He felt inferior. However, they were even more shocked than speechless. Chu Yang had actually received such an evaluation from Li Yu and felt that he was nothing. This was too fucking frightening. Suddenly, they heard Li Yu say indifferently, Deacon Do, watch your teeth. Don't bite people, or I'll cut off your head as well. These words came out of nowhere, causing almost everyone to look at Do Antai. Suddenly, Do Antai almost went limp, and the atmosphere instantly became strange. Many deacons couldn't help but look at Zhao Du and Do Antai. Previously, Do Antai wanted to kill Chu Yang, causing a big commotion. How could they not know? But now that they thought about it, it really wasn't that simple. Nangong Ying and Chu Yunlong's reactions were more or less the same. Their eyes couldn't help but turn cold. The enemy had discovered it faster than them. If not, Li Yu probably wouldn't have said these words today. Knock knock knock. Nangong Ying's finger tapped on the table, producing a crisp sound. Suddenly, all the deacons became nervous. Would he directly fall out with the Zhao family? Chapter 34. The crisp sound stopped, and Nangong Ying finally opened his mouth. Everyone, from now on, Chu Yang will be a core disciple of our martial courtyard. Everyone should treat him with caution. His words were neither salty nor light, but every deacon understood what he meant. This was a warning from Nangong Ying. He was warning Zhao clan. Who? The tense atmosphere instantly disappeared, and the deacons heaved a sigh of relief. If they were to shed all pretense of cordiality, it would be a fierce battle, and they all knew what this meant. Perhaps, many of them would lose their lives. As for Zhao clan and Coiling Dragon Martial Courtyard, it was hard to say who would win in the end. Zhao Du's tense heartstrings suddenly loosened. So what if their Zhao clan won against the entire Coiling Dragon Martial Courtyard? Behind the Coiling Dragon Martial Courtyard was a colossus, the Five Elements sect. Do Antai was already paralyzed in his chair. If Nangong Ying had decided to make things difficult for Zhao clan, the first one to die would have been him. Chu Yunlong didn't say anything, but the killing intent in his heart couldn't be restrained. He should have killed Do Antai earlier. No father would let go of such an enemy for plotting to kill his son. Trash, I was looking forward to it in vain. Li Yu closed his eyes and opened his mouth, making everyone's mouth twitch. Only he dared to call Nangong Ying a trash. Well, let me see if Elder Li is a trash, and if the little sheep he spoke of is really that amazing. Nangong Ying made the final decision. The matter was settled like this. In an instant, the gazes of the deacons couldn't help but turn towards the arena. They also wanted to know if Chu Yang was really that amazing. Chu Yang and Ji Jingcheng naturally didn't know what was going on in the upper echelons of the Coiling Dragon martial courtyard. Ji Jingcheng had a sword martial spirit and was famous for his sword skills in the Coiling Dragon martial courtyard. His cultivation was very good, reaching the peak of Hutian 7th stage and could reach Hutian 8th stage anytime. He was already considered a core disciple. You probably won't be too disappointed. After Ji Jingcheng's challenge, the sword martial spirit in Chu Yang's consciousness became extremely active, and his battle intent soared at this moment. Chu Yang had a feeling that the battle with Ji Jingcheng would make a huge breakthrough in his swordsmanship. With a clang, Chu Yang took out a sword from his storage ring and pulled it out. The blade of the 3-foot cyan steel sword glowed with a cold light. It was a very ordinary sword, but in the eyes of the crowd, it was so different. They felt that at this moment, Chu Yang was like an unsheathed sword, revealing its sharpness. Ji Jingcheng's pupils shrank. At that moment, his sword spirit started to tremble as if it was facing a great enemy. Such a situation had never happened before. Clang! Ji Jingcheng also pulled out his own sword. It was also 3 feet long, and its entire body was as white as jade. Wisps of cold air were emitted from it, and when the sun shone on it, it shone with a dazzling cold light. His sword was obviously a treasured sword. It was much better than Chu Yang's. Martial techniques in the primitive martial realm were divided into low, middle, and high grades. Weapons in the primitive martial realm were also divided into high, middle, and low grades. This was a high-grade treasure sword. I don't think I'm bullying others with my sword. Ji Jingcheng's words shocked everyone. He completely regarded Chu Yang as an extremely powerful opponent, and would not let go of any advantage. Below the stage, the disciples of the Martial Arts Institute could not help but widen their eyes. This was the first time Chu Yang had pulled out his sword. Even when facing the punishment deacon, Doan Tai, he did not pull out his sword. As for how good Chu Yang's swordsmanship was, they could tell from Ji Jingcheng's attitude. However, no one could imagine how amazing it was. Their minds were filled with images of Chu Yang using a mere wave parting palm to instantly kill his opponent. Sword out. Chu Yang moved. Ji Jingcheng also moved. The two swords clashed and lightly touched. The aura suddenly changed, and the spectators below the stage suddenly felt the air become suffocating. Their souls were oppressed to the point that they could not breathe. They were completely intimidated by the aura and sharp sword chi of the two people. Shua. Ji Jingcheng let out a long whistle, and took the initiative to attack. His sword moved like a nimble snake, leaving no trace. It was as if every direction was possible. The sword light enveloped Chu Yang's face, throat, chest, and many other vital points. With a hissing sound, the sword was like a huge snake, but also like a shooting arrow, splitting the air. Especially when he was exerting his strength, the tendons on his body were also like bowstrings, making wong-wong sounds. This sword, what the disciples of the Martial Arts Institute saw was not a sword, but hundreds of archers shooting at the same time, and arrows piercing the heart. Good. Chu Yang could not help but praise. When the sword pierced over, he suddenly felt an iron-blooded aura. It was as if the iron hooves of an army were trampling over. Wherever they went, heads would roll, and they did not fear life or death. Go to the spring terrace to recruit old subordinates, banners and banners will slay the king of hell. Such a poem could not help but appear in Chu Yang's mind, and it amazed him. A good opponent was hard to come by. Only with a good opponent could one continue to improve and stimulate one's potential. Chapter 35. Chu Yang also let out a long whistle. His sword flew out, and a fierce wind blew. The sleeves of the disciples of the Martial Arts Institute fluttered, and the fierce wind blew against their faces. Soon, the sound of waves could be heard incessantly. When Chu Yang stabbed out with his sword, there were 3 waves of energy at the tip of the sword. They were like 3 waves, and each wave pushed the other forward. Raising the wind and waves. Raising the wind and beating the waves. The rear waves drive the front waves. Wave palm, it was actually the wave palm, and it was still the wave palm. Chu Yang had actually turned a palm technique into a sword technique and used it to deal with Ji Jingcheng. He's crazy. Someone cried out in alarm. Ji Jingcheng is using the Spirit Snake Sword and the Thousand Soldiers Sword technique, which is most proficient in. The combination of the two techniques has an astonishing power. The sword is sometimes like a spirit snake, and sometimes like an army of millions. It's unfathomable. Chu Yang actually dared to use a palm technique as a sword technique against a mere wave-repelling palm. The disciples of the Martial Arts Academy were shocked because they knew Chu Yang very well. They knew what kind of sword technique he was practicing, and with a single glance, not only did they immediately understand its mysteries, but they also knew how powerful it was. In their eyes, Chu Yang was simply courting death. Even if it was the true wave palm, Ji Jingcheng would definitely stab him to death, let alone the so-called wave sword technique that had been changed from a palm technique to a sword technique. In fact, this was not the case. Chu Yang had already completely mixed the wind of the life-chasing sword technique into it. The waves were the sword, and the man was the wind. The wind and waves were one, and the man was one with the sword. The wind controlled the waves, and the man controlled the sword. When the sword met the attack, it immediately blocked all of Ji Jingcheng's sword paths and all of the directions of his attacks. Boom! The energy collided and exploded, and the stage seemed to shake. The clash of the two swords was like countless sharp arrows shooting into the water, and it was more like a flood drowning three armies. Ji Jingcheng was at a disadvantage. How was this possible? The wave-deflecting sword evolved from a mere wave-deflecting palm had completely suppressed the perfect fusion of Ji Jingcheng's Spirit Snake Sword and Thousand Soldier Sword. The snake's agility, swiftness, venom, and craftiness coincided with the path of the military. The combination of the two sword techniques was not as simple as 1 + 1. The power of the two techniques was even greater. However, such a perfect sword technique was completely suppressed by the snake. Oh my god, this can't be real, right? Is the wave palm really that powerful? Is this the wave palm that I know? Wave parting palm. I'm going to repeat it 100 times today. 100 times and 100 times. I don't believe that the wave-parting palm is so powerful. The disciples of the martial courtyard were completely enraged, and some of them couldn't help but curse. That's ridiculous. That cross of mine. Below the stage, it was like a pot of boiling water. Nangong Ying, Chu Yunlong and the others were also extremely shocked. This child is indeed extraordinary. The wave-parting sword evolved from the wave-parting palm is actually more powerful than the original wave-parting palm. Nangong Ying couldn't help but nod. Generally, when a palm technique was changed into a sword technique, or a sword technique into a palm technique, the original mystery would be lost, and the power would be weakened by a lot. This was known to all. Moreover, if one couldn't grasp the essence of the wave-parting palm, it would have no power at all. It was obvious that Chu Yang had not only completely comprehended the wave-parting palm, but also added his own thoughts into it. It could be said that the wave-parting sword was already a new martial technique. This was indeed very shocking. It was as if he had created his own martial technique. I didn't expect this little sheep to be so powerful. Indeed, I didn't expect this at all. With such a perception, no amount of dance would be able to produce it. Shocking. It seems that after Chu Fei, our martial courtyard will have another genius. The various deacons exclaimed again and again, especially those who denied that Chu Yang had relied on dance. The two deacons who fought with Deacon Zhong felt their cheeks burning, as if they had been slapped in the face. Previously, they had ridiculed Chu Yang for relying on dance to increase his cultivation. How short-sighted and stupid he was. Zhao Du's expression also changed greatly. Chu Yang was even more shocking than he had imagined. Now, he no longer doubted Li Yu's words. This scene fell into Chu Yunlong's eyes, making him sigh. Was this still his child who had given up on himself? How could a golden carp be a fish in a pond? Once the wind and clouds came, it would transform into a dragon. The wind and clouds hadn't come yet, but he had already transformed into a dragon. Chapter 36. Ji Jingcheng suddenly retracted his aura like a snake in hibernation. With a slide of his feet, he moved like an agile snake. As his body twisted, his entire person seemed to become faintly discernible, appearing and disappearing like a ghost as he attacked from the side. Strange peak rising, 1,000-soldier sword technique. This sword was like the path of the military, winning by surprise. Soldiers were impermanent, just as water was impermanent. There was no desperate momentum, only a strange angle, incomparably swift, sharp, and vicious attack. If his previous sword was said to be right in the art of war, then this sword was strange. The combination of right and strange had reached perfection. This kind of ghostly footwork was similar to the footwork of the assassin in the wind-chasing life-stealing sword. Chu Yang's body slightly turned, and caught Ji Jingcheng in an instant. He faced Ji Jingcheng's sword, and chopped it down. This sword was very dangerous. Chu Yang suddenly erupted, exerting force and infusing his junqi. The sword in his hand suddenly became abnormally heavy. At this moment, the sword seemed to have turned into a knife, slashing down as if it was splitting a mountain to save its mother. Splitting Mount Hua, breaking the strait with horizontal. Ji Jingcheng's expression changed slightly. Chu Yang had actually caught the trajectory of his sword in an instant. He immediately changed his move, his sword rising up like a dragon rising into the sky. This change was very exquisite. His sword seemed to be suppressing the dragon at the foot of Mount Hua. Chu Yang splitting the mountain saved him, allowing him to break free and walk in the sky, summoning clouds and summoning rain. The sword rose like a dragon, suddenly transforming from a dragon into a snake, viciously pouncing to bite Chu Yang's vital points. Chu Yang did not retreat. Instead, he took half a step forward, his other hand holding the scabbard to meet the attack. Like a snake man holding a snake in a bag, he wanted to put the snake back in. This move was very exquisite and unimaginable. With a clang, Ji Jingcheng's sword pierced into the scabbard. However, he reacted quickly withdrawing his sword and retreating. Otherwise, if he lost his sword, he would be at a disadvantage. Like the wind, Ji Jingcheng hurriedly retreated, while Chu Yang hurriedly advanced. The former was like a huge wave, while the latter was like the wind. The two of them chased after each other endlessly. Their heads and tails were connected, and they were like the wind. Where there was a wave, there would be a wind. They sped through the arena, their feet not touching the dust. In just a few moments, the two of them had both fallen into a crisis, and each of them had resolved the crisis in a stunning manner, causing everyone watching to almost forget to breathe. Whoosh! All of a sudden, Ji Jingcheng seemed to have fallen into a waterfall. His body suddenly shrank and he seemed to have disappeared. Like a spirit snake suddenly slithering into the underbrush, he suddenly disappeared without a trace. Fast, inconceivably fast. In that instant, the people below the stage couldn't understand the profoundness within. It was as if Ji Jingcheng had suddenly become invisible. It was inconceivable, and it caused people to be repeatedly astonished. Chu Yang didn't know how he did it. It was as if he was Xiong Yu who had fallen into Han Xinming's trap. His original advantage instantly disappeared without a trace, and even became a disadvantage. It was as if he had fallen into the trap of luring the enemy in, and had been cut off from his way back. In the blink of an eye, the situation had changed. Swish, swish, quick sword, crafty sword, poisonous sword, quick, crafty, and poisonous. It was as if thousands of hibernating venomous snakes had formed a swarm. It was as if a schemer's long-planned plan had been completely unleashed, and it couldn't be stopped. At this moment, Chu Yang seemed to have no other choice but to retreat again. He retreated, and retreated again, and again. Chu Yang dodged the attacks 3 times in a row. Then, he let out a long and loud roar. It sounded like the roar of a tiger or the cry of a dragon. His aura became extremely heroic as he inhaled and exhaled. Then, he unleashed his sword attacks one after another like a violent storm. The great thousand-leaf hands was fully utilized in his sword technique. Sword shadows appeared one after another, forming a sword screen that collided with Ji Jingcheng's sword. Ding, ding. Chapter 37. The disciples of the martial courtyard below the arena were completely unable to understand the sword techniques of these two people. They even discovered a strange scene. It seemed that Chu Yang and Ji Jingcheng's swords were clashing on the right side, but the crisp sounds of swords clashing were actually coming from the left side. This was definitely not the first time such a situation had happened. The two swords were extremely fast and extremely strange. The disciples of the martial institution were flabbergasted. Chu Yang and Ji Jingcheng were probing each other at the beginning, but now, it was a real head-on clash. This kind of fight was based on whose true chi was more vigorous and long-lasting, whose physical strength was more powerful and abundant. Sword against sword, speed against speed, craftiness against craftiness, wonder against wonder, and ruthlessness against ruthlessness. In the midst of a battle, inner breath, genuine chi, and strength collided. No matter whose genuine chi or strength was weaker, if they couldn't connect, their defense would be breached and they would lose without a doubt. Fast. 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 Both of them attacked at high speed, each strike accurately intercepting the other's attacks. This kind of speed left behind a series of afterimages. This kind of fighting style didn't have the slightest bit of trickery. It was a competition of strength. Excluding all other factors, whoever was stronger would win. Chu Yang had actually withstood it. Although he was only at the peak of the 6th level of the origin martial realm, he didn't fall into a disadvantage when facing Ji Jingcheng, who was at the 7th level of the origin martial realm. He even faintly suppressed Ji Jingcheng in terms of strength. The strength of 9 tigers, while Ji Jingcheng only had the strength of 8.5 tigers. The disciples of the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution were speechless. What Huang Long or Ou Junshuang? Their defeat wasn't unjust at all. In front of Chu Yang, they were all trash. They weren't worthy of Chu Yang using his full strength. Using the wave-pushing palm was already polite. Only someone like Ji Jingcheng could compete with Chu Yang. The others didn't have this qualification. Brother Chu's son is indeed amazing. The peak of the 6th level of the origin martial realm is 1 level lower, but is not inferior to the 7th level of the origin martial realm. Clearly, the quality of his true chi is superior. The power of 9 tigers also completely broke through the 1st level of the origin martial realm's limit of 1 tiger. His swordsmanship is even more exquisite. Not only is his sword fast, strange, unlike Ji Jingcheng's, his sword is sometimes bold and unrestrained. It's very ethereal, and it makes people sigh in admiration. Not to mention Ji Jingcheng's cultivation base, his sword technique should be one of the best in our academy. Even the core disciples are far inferior to him. The steward's table was also filled with astonishment. Not only were they astonished by Ji Jingcheng, but they were even more astonished by Chu Yang. The clash of sword techniques between the two was extremely tit-for-tat. If Chu Yang had any disadvantage, it would be the sword in his hand. The sword in his hand wasn't a treasure sword, but a mere cyan steel sword. After continuously clashing with Ji Jingcheng's sword for hundreds of times, it was as if his opponent's sword was a large hammer tempering the sword in his hand, tempering all the impurities in his sword. From the tip of the sword, Chu Yang's sword was pierced until it was broken bit by bit. At the same time, Ji Jingcheng's swordsmanship was also transmitted to his body. His spirit, body, flesh, and soul seemed to be like his swordsmanship. They were continuously shaken and refined by Ji Jingcheng's swordsmanship, becoming purer and purer. His heart of the sword was awakened, and it became firmer and firmer. After being tempered by the sword technique, it became more and more crystal clear. Chapter 38. Who? Suddenly, as Chu Yang inhaled and exhaled, a whirlpool and a blast of air was formed. A strong wind blew, and with Chu Yang as the center, a cyclone was formed that could be seen with the naked eye. Boom! At the moment when the two sword techniques were at their most intense, Chu Yang's physical strength seemed to have been raised to the limit. His life force had also been raised to the highest level. Suddenly, at this moment, his sword martial spirit suddenly resonated with his heart and his body. At this moment, everyone seemed to feel that Chu Yang's body seemed to have suddenly collapsed inwards, and everything in the world seemed to have been swallowed up. Immediately, his body bloomed with astonishing sword light, and his entire body seemed to have turned into a sword. Everyone seemed to have heard the sound of a sword ringing in their hearts. This was the sound of the soul, heart of the sword, body of the sword. At the deacon's table, all the deacons, Nan Gongying and even Li Yu jumped up from their seats at the same time. Their pupils seemed to be trembling. They were terrified to the extreme. Sword cultivators were also called swordsmen. Their attack power was the sharpest and most terrifying. They could crush anyone of the same level. It was extremely shocking. Many people longed to become a sword cultivator, but very few people could cultivate the heart of the sword and the body of the sword. For a sword martial spirit, there was only 1 out of 10,000 people. Out of 10,000 people, only one would be able to cultivate a sword Dao heart and a sword Dao body. Even with the sword martial spirit, the difficulty of cultivating without the sword martial spirit was even greater. It was almost impossible. Therefore, cultivating the heart of the sword and the body of the sword could be said to be extremely difficult. Those who could cultivate them were peerless geniuses in the sword Dao. This was the beginning of a sword cultivator. There was a huge difference between heaven and earth. Only those who could cultivate them could become a true sword cultivator. It was like a crown prince ascending the throne to become an emperor. Chu Yang actually managed to cultivate the heart of the sword and the body of the sword during the competition. At this moment, Chu Yang's aura suddenly dropped. From the peak of the 6th level of the origin martial realm, he directly dropped to the 4th level of the origin martial realm. His strength of 9 tigers also dropped to the strength of 3 tigers, leaving him with the strength of 6 tigers. But at this time, traces of sword chi rushed out from his body like a divine sword, causing people's hearts to palpitate. Ji Jingcheng's eyes also shone brightly. He knew that Chu Yang needed an even fiercer sword technique at this moment, so he suddenly used all his strength to maintain his sword technique at its most blazing state. The entire arena was filled with sword shadows, but at this moment, everyone at the steward's table felt their hearts tighten. Ji Jingcheng's actions could make Chu Yang's heart of the sword and body of the sword even purer, but it also entailed an extremely great risk. Chu Yang's heart of the sword and body of the sword had just reached the initial stage, so his strength suddenly dropped drastically. If he couldn't resist Ji Jingcheng's sword technique, it was very likely that he would be killed in one strike. This was Chu Yang's crisis, but also Chu Yang's opportunity. His martial Dao, sword Dao, and opportunity couldn't be stopped. Everything could only depend on Chu Yang's ability. If he died, he would become a pile of soil. His heart of the sword and body of the sword would be useless. If he could succeed, his heart of the sword and body of the sword would be extremely pure. Clang, 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 clang. Sparks flew everywhere, and the sword in Chu Yang's hand finally completely broke apart, leaving only the sword hilt. Ji Jingcheng's sword directly pierced towards the hilt, a trace of loneliness flashed in his eyes. In the end, it's still not enough. But at this moment, he realized that he had stabbed nothing. Soon after, he felt a sharp energy stop at his throat, and a cold light flickered. Ji Jingcheng was startled when he saw Chu Yang. Junior brother Chu, congratulations, congratulations. The last sword strike couldn't be distinguished from the real one, so Ji Jingcheng's loss wasn't unjust at all. It was just that such a loss made him feel frustrated. He naturally didn't know that this was the real one from the Great Thousand Leaf Hands, so his loss couldn't be more normal. Senior brother Ji, congratulations, congratulations. Ji Jingcheng suddenly froze. What was there to be happy about? But soon after, Chu Yang pointed at his chest, and a stream of energy blasted into his body. In an instant, his entire body became sluggish, as if he had been killed by Chu Yang. Chu Yang left to comprehend the heart of the sword and body of the sword. Just as he disappeared from everyone's sight, countless sword cries suddenly rang out from Ji Jingcheng's body. At the same time, his cultivation level dropped to the 5th tier, and his strength dropped from 8.5 tigers to 5 tigers. The sword light around him blazed. Ha ha! Ji Jingcheng also laughed heartily. With a whoosh, he left like a beam of sword light, disappearing without a trace. The scene was deathly silent. After a while, there was an explosion of astonishment, heart of the sword and body of the sword. Heavens, doesn't this mean that our martial institution will have 2 swordsmen in the future? This is too shocking. Ordinary sects aren't as terrifying and bizarre as our martial institution. The crowd below the stage was shocked. Apart from Zhao Du and the others, the deacon stands were also filled with joy. Brother Chu, congratulations, congratulations. Chu Yunlong was grinning from ear to ear. At this time, he couldn't be modest. He cupped his fists and said, congratulations, congratulations. Chu Yang was Chu Yunlong's son, but he was also a disciple of the martial institution. There was nothing wrong with his words. Ha ha. After everyone laughed, Nangong Ying announced the end of the competition. The champion was Chu Yang. Chapter 39. If you have my life, then you will be able to plant a golden lotus in the fire. When Chu Yang returned home, he inexplicably said such a sentence. It was as if the excited sword martial spirit had cut off the string of fate. The formation of the sword heart and the sword body made the sword martial spirit look like a beggar who had entered the palace and become the emperor. He took a deep breath and spat it out. A white streak of light flashed past. It was 3 feet long and looked like a daoist flying sword. The qi was in his dantian and he spat it out. The qi was condensed into a sword. It was like the immortal sword in Chu Yang's mind. At this moment, the qi in his body was like 9 beads, moving through his 5 viscera and rumbling thunder. Although the Mahamayuri scripture had dropped to the 4th level of the origin martial realm, it was already at perfection and extraordinary. The intent was like a heavenly blade that could cut off the flow of water. A martial artist's pursuit of the Tao required the intent to be like Vajra. The sword could cut through everything, but it could not cut off the flow of water. Only the heart of the Tao, the unfathomable heavenly blade, could cut off the flow of water. Chu Yang used the full martial spirit. He closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. His breath was very distant and the passage of time seemed to slow down. His heartbeat also seemed to slow down by half a beat. It was about 8 or 9 beats per minute. However, every time his heart beat, it would produce a sword cry. The blood in his body was like a waterproof gate that was opened. His blood was like a flying sword that flew out at an extreme speed, cutting through all the obstacles and transmitted to every corner of his body, all the way to the tip of his hair. Bang! Suddenly, a flame came out from Chu Yang's body. It was raging and his whole body was floating, becoming the heart of the flame. His whole body was like a sword. The heart of the flame was the sword, the heart of the sword was the heavenly flame. At this moment, the sword heart heavenly flame acted on its own and showed its miraculous ability. Chu Yang, who was in deep sleep, suddenly opened his eyes. 2 balls of flames appeared in his eyes and 2 beams of light shot out like 2 heavenly swords. Bang! It burned everything in its way and then the sound of the swords resounded. Shio! The sword heart heavenly flame suddenly rushed out from Chu Yang's body. The flames outside the sword heart heavenly flame were retracted into the flame heart heavenly flame. Shortly after, the flames completely disappeared and a divine sword appeared. It instantly became like a black hole, crazily swallowing the energy in the world. This was a heavenly sword nurtured in the flames. It was born from the world and was full of spirituality. It accompanied Chu Yang's heart of the sword and the formation of his body of the sword. It was like a chick breaking out of its shell. Whoosh! A gale blew, and in an instant, there was a gale everywhere between heaven and earth. The energy of heaven and earth that swept in dyed the entire small courtyard into a colorful world. If someone saw this at this moment, they would definitely be alarmed by such a miraculous sight. The Coiling Dragon Martial INSTI Tushan's tournament might have just ended, but most of the people were still at the venue. Their focus was on the tournament, and even Chu Yang's mother wasn't an exception. After a period of time, all the miraculous sights disappeared, leaving only Chu Yang in a deep slumber in the courtyard. 3 days later, Chu Yang was awakened by hunger. He might still be sleeping in the courtyard, but he was already sleeping on a simple bed. There was a porcelain bottle beside him, and there was a silver elixir in it. Chu Yang was now extremely hungry. He was very aware of his own body and could even sense the degree of hunger. He knew how much energy he had to consume in order to eliminate this feeling of hunger. This was the manifestation of the Sword Tao body after evolution and transformation. It was obvious that his father knew what would happen after the Sword Tao body was formed, and had specially placed such an elixir beside him. He directly swallowed the elixir into his stomach. His stomach squirmed as he digested it. Chapter 40. Chu Yang's digestion speed was at least 10 times faster than an ordinary person's. An ordinary person would need an entire afternoon to digest a meal, but when he circulated his internal organs, he could digest everything within a few minutes. He could also seal his qi and blood and enter a state of suspended animation. Even if he did not eat or drink for 10 days, he could still survive and maintain a strong physical strength. This silver pill contained an extremely shocking amount of energy. The medicinal properties within seemed to be related to swords. At this moment, Chu Yang was even more certain that his father had specially prepared this for him. The medicinal effects of the pill were instantly released. It was as if a world of swords had opened up. Countless flying swords flew out and were absorbed by his body and transformed. In a trance, Chu Yang seemed to have become a monster that ate swords. At the same time, he felt that the hunger in his body had completely disappeared. Chu Yang swallowed the silver pill. Then, he lay down on the bed and began to sleep. He entered the deepest level of meditation. Clang, clang, clang. In his deep sleep, Chu Yang seemed to be breathing out streams of sword qi from his mouth and nose. The blood in his body flowed faster and faster. Suddenly, the sound of swords clanging could be heard. The blood in his veins was surging like a raging river or a waterfall. Every river seemed to be swords, and the waterfall that poured down was also a curtain of swords. The sound of swords could be heard from his body. If one closed their eyes, they would feel that it was not a person in front of them, but countless flying swords. Countless flying swords were flying, forming a formation, a river, and a sea. Another 3 days later. Little sheep, you slept for 6 days and 6 nights before waking up. I thought you were already dead. Chu En's first sentence after Chu Yang's was full of concern and concern. His mother, Liu Yi, and Chu En had been waiting for a long time. If not for Chu Yang's long and steady breathing, they would have thought that Chu Yang was already dead. Moreover, they did not dare to get close to him. With his body as the center, there seemed to be an extremely majestic and terrifying aura. It was as if there was a mountain of swords there, and one would be injured with a single touch. It made people feel both reverence and fear. A person who had slept for 6 days should be covered in dust. However, Chu Yang was as clean as new, without a speck of dust. Clang, clang, clang. When he sat up and opened his eyes, 2 beams of light pierced out like 2 sharp swords. The sound of swords clanging rang out continuously, and his gaze made Chu En unable to look at him. She could not help but slide away, fear in her heart. At this moment, Chu Yang didn't seem to be a human. He didn't seem to have a trace of human aura. It was as if he was a god born from heaven and earth. But soon, all the mystical aura disappeared. It seemed as if nothing had ever happened. Little sheep, how dare you frighten your sister? Bang, bang, bang. Chu En went up and habitually trampled on Chu Yang. Sister, it's you who is timid. How could your brother have the ability to scare you? You are a heroine. Chu Yang complained. He had just woken up and he already deserved to be scolded. You are still so stubborn. Chu En recalled that feeling. She had already learned about the sword Dao body from her father. It was not as terrifying as this. How could her brother be so shocking? At that moment, she felt that he was not human. Chapter 41. In the Coiling Dragon Martial Arts Institution, the annual Inter-Academy competition had already come to an end. Chu Yang's unexpected victory as a dark horse became the biggest news. No one had thought that it would be Chu Yang, the little sheep that everyone knew. However, from now on, they could only keep this name in their hearts. They didn't dare to rashly say it out loud. Who would dare to? After Chu Yang woke up, the Chu family finally gathered together to eat. The family was jubilant, and at the same time began to interrogate Chu Yang. He had actually become the champion of the Inter-Academy competition. Furthermore, he had been unstoppable all the way and had even cultivated a sword Dao body. Although no matter if it was Chu Fei or Chu En, they had both been promoted to core disciples as champions of the Inter-Academy competition, but the two had been geniuses since childhood. It wasn't strange for them to have such results. But Chu Yang's performance had been very mediocre. This time, He had suddenly erupted without a sound, and had also won the championship. This made the Chu family very surprised and astonished. Young didn't you just break through to the Hutian 4th stage? In just a short month, you actually reached the peak of the Hutian 6th stage. Even the deacons of the martial arts institution couldn't learn the great thousand-leaf hands, but you also learned it. Liu Yi was really curious. She was naturally very familiar with this son of hers. Also, how did you cultivate a sword heart and a sword body? Honestly tell me, or else I'll punish you. Chu Na faced Chu Yang and raised her fist. Chu Yunlong also wanted to know the reason. He wouldn't ask, but now that he had ears, he immediately revealed an attentive expression. You ask me, but who should I ask? Chu Yang spread out his hands and shamelessly said, I was originally a genius, but I didn't want to attack my sister's young heart, so I deliberately pretended to be stupid. Not long ago, I enlightened myself, but I wasn't careful and became like this. Enlightened. Liu Yi was slightly surprised, but immediately felt relieved. It seemed that this explanation was the most suitable. She had watched Chu Yang grow up, so she knew that Chu Yang had a few roundworms in his stomach. Enlightenment was not without precedent. There were many ignorant people like Chu Yang who suddenly became enlightened one day. Chu Yunlong had also accepted such a saying. Chu Yang was like a muddle-headed person who suddenly became enlightened one day. People were completely different from before. Little sheep. Chu Na patted Chu Yang's shoulder. TSK, you're amazing. Even that arrogant brat Ji Jingcheng was beaten down by you. Later, let me teach you what modesty is. Sis, don't tell me you like that Ji Jingcheng and want to avenge him. In an instant, Chu Na's face turned red. She wanted to tear apart Chu Yang's mouth. In the end, Chu Yunlong violently intervened and made a decision. Pride needs to be guarded. Chu Yang needs to be taught a lesson. 2 hours after dinner, the moonlight was like silver, and the night sky was dotted with stars. In the spacious courtyard of the Chu family, a few torches were lit, so it did not seem dark. Apart from the 3 people of the Chu family, there was another person present, and that was Zhong Hao. After dinner, he came to find Chu Yang. Yang you're careful now? Chu Yunlong wanted to know what level Chu Yang had reached. To be honest, he could not see through Chu Yang at all. The moonlight and starlight sprinkled on Chu Yang, but he was like a rock, unmoving. For him, it was best to personally experience the power of the Qi Soul realm. Boom! Suddenly, an extremely dangerous signal rose up in Chu Yang's heart. A blue Jin Yuan suddenly rose up from the top of Chu Yunlong's head. It was dense like a tide, and it seemed like a real wave, letting out a surging sound. Huge waves washing away the sand, stormy waves beating the shore. Compared to Chu Yang's wave-pushing palm, it was as different as clouds and mud. Chu Yang's wave-pushing palm only had sound and power, but everything was fake. On the other hand, Chu Yunlong's waves formed by his true essence seemed to be real ocean water, real waves, as if they were real and could be passed off as real. Jin Yuan materialization. This is the difference between Jin Qi and martial spirit fusion. True Qi and martial spirit fused together to form true essence. It was as if Qi had a spirit and a soul. True essence seemed to be one's own thoughts. Not only could it be used as one's own arm, but it could also be used to display one's own intentions. Its power was greatly increased, and one could even construct things according to one's own thoughts. That dark blue true essence suddenly condensed and turned into a huge palm print. With a boom, it appeared above Chu Yang's head like a mountain and pressed down on his head. Chapter 42. Although the gap between the Qi Soul realm and the origin martial realm is only one realm, the difference is like heaven and earth. True Yuan is the limitless extension of the Qi Soul realm martial artist's hands and feet. Inconceivable. Since there was no way to avoid it, he could only face it head-on and shatter the palm formed by his true Yuan. Great thousand-leaf hands. Chu Yang's eyes flashed as he erupted with all his strength. His arms suddenly shook, and 8 more arms appeared on each arm. For a moment, there were layers upon layers of illusions. Great thousand-leaf hands, perfection. When Chu Yunlong saw this, his eyes widened, almost popping out of their sockets. Although he had heard from Li Yu that Chu Yang had learned the Great Thousand Leaf Hands, he had never imagined that in such a short time, Chu Yang would actually be able to practice the Great Thousand Leaf Hands to the perfection realm. This was an unheard of speed, especially when this was the Great Thousand Leaf Hands. Chu Yunlong had never learned it. Liu Yi, Chu Na, and Chu Yang's childhood friend, Zhong Hao, could not help but fall into a daze when they saw this scene. At this moment, Chu Yang's illusionary arms seemed to have turned into a divine ring, as if he was a deity with a divine ring behind his head. Boom! One by one, the arms slammed into the giant palm and instantly exploded, turning into pieces of leaves. 1 arm, 10 leaves. 16 arms, 160 leaves. In an instant, the leaves fell down and danced around Chu Yang like palm prints. It was as if there were green butterflies flying around him. It was extremely beautiful. Although these butterfly-like leaves looked weak and harmless, they were actually extremely powerful. Each leaf was like a glaring Vajra, fully displaying the Buddhist profundity of the great Kiliakasam leaf hands. In fact, it was as if the flames of Buddha's wrath were about to erupt from them. This is the Great Thousand Leaf Hands, the only copy that no one in the martial scripture pavilion can learn. Too beautiful. Chu Na's eyes were about to form a heart shape. Unlike Chu Na, Liu Yi, and Zhong Hao, even though they had not cultivated it to the highest realm, when they saw Chu Yang use it, the illusionary arms turned into countless leaves that instantly drowned them out. This made them feel that they had no way of blocking it. And this method was all-pervasive and impossible to guard against. It was extremely powerful. 10,000 leaves returned to their root. Bang bang bang. More than 100 leaves, like moths flying into a flame, collided with Chu Yunlong's true essence giant hand one after another, producing a series of muffled bangs, exploding waves of chi waves, hitting the ground. Suddenly, the blue stone laid on the ground shattered, and dust flew everywhere. Chu Yunlong's true essence giant palm contained a terrifying amount of power. Chu Yang's great thousand-leaf palms struck the palm imprint, but it was still unable to neutralize all of its power. Flood Dragon's Claw. Chu Yang's body issued a dragon's roar. His hand grabbed downwards like a dragon's claw, and pierced through the palm print. 5 bloody holes appeared on the palm print. It looked like a real big hand. The palm print was on the verge of collapse, but it was still a bit off. Flood Dragon's claw was not enough to crush it. Chu Yunlong could not help but exclaim in surprise. Chu Yang's attack was not inferior to the Great Thousand Leaf Hand, which made him even more surprised. But what happened next was even more unexpected. Wave Parting Palm. Chu Yang was using the Wave Parting Palm at this time. He was using the Wave Parting Palm, a mid-level origin martial technique, to resist Chu Yunlong's Great Thousand Leaf Hand. The Wave Parting Palm was only a mid-level origin martial technique of the Martial Academy. Many disciples of the Martial Academy knew it. Especially after this academy competition, the Wave Parting Palm had become even more famous. Bang! Chu Yang instantly used all 6 moves of the Wave Deflecting Palm. With a loud boom, Chu Yunlong's quintessential essence hand was actually shattered by the Wave Deflecting Palm, which was only a mid-level primordial martial technique. Chu Yunlong was stunned. Liu Yi and Chu Na were also stunned. Zhong Hao was also stunned. Chu Yang naturally had his reasons for being able to do so. The Great Thousand Leaf Palms had blocked the power of Bo Cheng's attack, and then the Flood Dragon's Claw had destroyed more than 45% of the attack. The huge palm made of true essence was on the verge of collapse. The Wave Parting Palm was just the last straw. It seemed easy, but it was not simple. Not every martial technique could become such a straw, so Chu Yunlong was still very surprised. Chu Yang was like leading a flock of sheep to defeat a wolf. No matter how many sheep there were, could they hurt a wolf? Chapter 43. My God, Yang, you're amazing. You can even do this. Can you be a bit more exaggerated? Chu Yunlong gave Zhong Hao full marks. If Zhong Hao didn't stand up and shout, he really wouldn't know how to praise his son. After all, he didn't want Chu Yang to be blindly arrogant and have his tail raised. Immediately, Zhong Hao beamed with joy and said in high spirits, "Hurry up, genius, take a look at my fragrant elephant vigorous technique for me. This little brother has practiced for many years and has never been able to find the right path. Today, I finally caught a genius. How can I let him go? This was the reason why Zhong Hao had come. He had heard that Chu Yang had learned the great thousand-leaf hands and his talent was astonishing. However, he still couldn't learn the fragrant elephant vigorous technique, so he immediately found Chu Yang. Fragrant elephant vigorous technique. When Chu Yang heard it, he felt that it was extraordinary. The heavenly spirit continent divided the strength of tigers, elephants, and dragons. A tiger's strength was 1,000 jin and could draw an 8-stone bow. An elephant's strength was 10,000 jin and a dragon's strength was 100,000 jin. It was very difficult for a primitive martial realm martial artist to have the strength of an elephant. Normally, only after cultivating to the Qi spirit realm could they have the strength of an elephant. The fragrant elephant vigorous technique was named after an elephant. This kind of martial technique seemed to have the meaning of reaching the strength of an elephant in the primitive martial realm. There was also the fragrant elephant, which was related to Buddhism. The fragrant elephant crossed the river, cutting off the flow of people. It meant that the Buddhist Dharma was profound and could cut off thousands of strands of worry. Just like the fragrant elephant crossing the river, the front thought stopped and the back thought stopped. Although my cultivation level has dropped and my strength has dropped, if I recover, I estimate that I can break through the strength of 9 tigers and reach the strength of an elephant. Chu Yang thought in his heart. However, with the fragrant elephant vigorous technique, not only did he have one more martial technique, he also estimated that he would have one more method to increase his strength. Only a childhood friend like Zhong Hao would share this kind of martial technique with him, so this kind of request was not something he couldn't refuse. Zhong Hao spoke excitedly and immediately demonstrated the fragrant elephant vigorous technique he had comprehended. Just as he said, his learning was very shallow. Many of the moves he only had scaly claws. After using half of them, he couldn't continue, and the amazing parts of the moves were not revealed. In particular, although his punches and kicks contained genuine qi and explosive power, they did not touch upon the meaning of the Buddhist incense elephant. He could not display the true power of the incense elephant. However, even so, when he displayed it, it gave off an extremely imposing feeling. It was as if he possessed the might of a divine elephant, the might of a barbarian elephant. Zhong Hao had practiced the following moves for the elephant fragrance great strength formula. Fragrant elephant fetch water. Xiang xiang mai tian. Xiong xiong was released. Fragrant elephant camel mountain. Incense elephant crossing the river. Chu Yang let out a soft cry of surprise. These intermittent movements made the genuine energy that was brewing in his body from the Mahamayuri scripture to resonate with Zhong Hao's movements. The genuine energy started to stir along with Zhong Hao's movement. In his eyes, it was no longer Zhong Hao's every move or Xiong Xiong's every move and every encounter. Instead, it was like the process of a Buddha's enlightenment. The exquisite transformations that Zhong Hao had not displayed naturally appeared in his mind. In an instant, he seemed to have completely memorized the fragrant elephant great strength formula. It was extremely magical. Although the few moves that Zhong Hao had practiced were not so exquisite, and Chu Yang did not obtain the specific mental cultivation method, at this moment, the 5-colored lotus in his body was vibrating continuously. Various scenes emerged, and one by one, fragrant elephants appeared. It was like the process of enlightenment of the Mahamayuri Sutra. The genuine qi of the Mahamayuri Sutra in his body flowed in a strange way, urging the rising power in his body, allowing him to clearly grasp the mystery of the elephant vigorous technique. Xiang xiang fetch water. Xiang xiang mai tian. Xiong xiong was released. Chapter 44. The more Chu Yang pondered over the changes of the vigorous elephant formula dragon, the deeper his understanding of the vigorous elephant formula dragon became. This was the effect of the Mahamayuri Sutra. It seemed like this cultivation technique was much more profound than he had imagined. It was as if he was lying on the shoulder of the giant, Mahamayuri, to comprehend everything. The reason was probably that the vigorous elephant formula dragon was related to Buddhism. It had the same origin as the Mahamayuri Sutra and was not related to Buddhism. Therefore, The profoundness of the vigorous elephant formula dragon was naturally deduced by his Mahamayuri Sutra. His true chi circulated like a surging river. Yang, how is it? This vigorous elephant formula dragon was accidentally obtained by my uncle. My uncle didn't understand the profoundness within it. Originally, he asked Uncle Chu to help him study it. What Zhong Hao said about the vigorous elephant formula dragon was naturally false. Zhong Hao's uncle, Chu Yang, naturally knew about it. He was also a martial artist, but his strength was weak. As Zhong Hao and Chu Yang had a good relationship, Chu Yunlong had given him some pointers. After that, Zhong Hao's uncle seemed to have been enlightened. His strength increased by leaps and bounds, and he was now doing well. Zhong Hao's family situation had improved because of his uncle. However, he and his mother still stayed in the Coiling Dragon Martial Arts Institution as they were grateful for it. This was also considered a form of protection, and it was related to the Coiling Dragon Martial Arts Institution. When Zhong Hao's uncle was outside, the people outside had to give him some face. Chu Yang didn't make a sound. He was still immersed in deducing the profoundness of the vigorous elephant formula dragon. The precise changes of every move and style were all under his control. This feeling was really wonderful. In the past, he couldn't even comprehend the Mahamayuri Sutra. But now, without using his genius martial spirit, he could deduce everything just by looking at some moves without any mental cultivation method. The difficulty was undoubtedly much more difficult than comprehending the Mahamayuri Sutra according to the scripture. But now, he felt that it was extremely easy. Is it because of the genius martial spirit or because of the awakening of my previous memories? It seems like I have been enlightened just like the one who was lying. Maybe it's also because after practicing so many martial skills, my horizons have completely increased. Chu Yang's mind surged as he thought to himself, no matter what, I'm very amazing right now. The vigorous fragrant elephant formula is obvious at a glance. Haozi, watch carefully. Chu Yang said, incense is related to Buddha. What you just did is completely wrong. Have you ever heard of incense crossing the river, cutting off the flow of the masses? The true qi in Chu Yang's body began to circulate. His body moved, and an incomparably wild aura erupted from his body. It was as if a ferocious statue had suddenly rushed out from the jungle. Zhong Hao was startled. He had never expected that such a brutal aura would suddenly erupt from Chu Yang's thin and weak body. Chu Yang's hand moved, and soon after, there was a crisp pa sound. His skin, flesh, tendons, and bones were incomparably coordinated. His body was like a statue of the god of berserkers. His true qi circulated to his arm, and in an instant, it was as soft as an elephant's trunk. From his chest came the sound of an elephant's trumpet. Although the sound was low, it shook Zhong Hao's blood and qi to the point of churning. His chest felt as if there was a large stone pressing down on it, and he was almost bleeding from the pressure. Incense elephant fetches water. Chu Yang's hand swung out like an elephant's trunk. His true qi surged violently. In a trance, it was like a statue of the god of berserkers fetching water. It was more like a statue of the god of berserkers using its trunk to fetch a Buddhist scripture and obtain the true essence of Buddha from within. Suddenly, there was a joyful trumpet. The trumpet was mixed with the joy of enlightenment. It constantly emitted from his body, and the sound was deafening. It shook and tempered the skin, flesh, tendons, and bones of his entire body. Incense elephant Mai Tian. The elephant steps were big, and people called it the elephant walking on the field. Chu Yang took a step forward, and in an instant, he covered a distance of 3 feet. He was like a statue of the god of berserkers who was joyful after gaining enlightenment. His body was as light as the clouds. Chu Yang's body was also as light as a swallow, as if there was no trace of weight, and he was extremely agile. Incense elephant camel mountain. Chu Yang used the third style. He moved his feet, and with a dong, a loud sound came from the ground. In an instant, his body became abnormally heavy, as if a mountain was moving. With every step he took, a piece of bluestone with a radius of 2 to 3 feet would be crushed by his feet. Dong, dong, dong. As he moved his feet, the crushed stones were shaken and floated in the air. They were about a foot high, and then they were shattered by the violent force. At the same time, his arms were like an elephant's trunk, and he kept swinging them forward, causing the air to crackle. His strength was fierce and overbearing. It was as if the statue of the god of berserkers had gone through the initial enlightenment and immediately went on to further enlightenment. It realized the vastness and profoundness of Buddhism. Every step of enlightenment was like moving a mountain. It was even difficult for it to move an inch forward. It was as if it was trapped in a cage, and all of this had evolved into a heavy weight. Chapter 45. Fragrant Elephant Crossing the River. Shua. Immediately, in the eyes of Zhong Hao, Chu Yunlong, and the Chu family, they lost sight of Chu Yang. Immediately after, they heard a crisp sound. The wall of the courtyard was like a piece of paper, pierced through by Chu Yang, leaving behind only a human-shaped hole. Looking through that hole, they saw Chu Yang nearly a kilometer away. Hiss! Chu Yunlong and the others all sucked in a breath of cold air. Was this heaven-defying? With one step, he was 100 meters away. Their feelings were not as deep as Chu Yang's. He also did not expect this fragrant elephant crossing the river to be so shocking. Just now, when he moved, all the true qi in his body was sucked dry. Immediately after, his body uncontrollably rushed out. At that moment, he felt like he could cross the river of stars and travel through time and space. Not only does this move contain a shocking movement technique, like the Buddhist's divine feat, like shrinking the ground into an inch, but it is also an extremely brutal attack. No matter how many enemies you have, no matter how many attacks you have, even if they form a river, once you cross it, they will all be knocked over and all attacks will be blown away. Fragrant elephant crossing the river, cutting off the flow of people. It is indeed shocking. Chu Yang's entire body was completely exhausted. His entire body was soft and fluffy. The consumption of this move was too terrifying, and if one's comprehension was deeper, and the Buddhist doctrine was deeper, he felt that this fragrant elephant crossing the river could continuously cut off the flow of people, cut off the 3,000 strands of worry, and even cut off everything. It could completely transform into a divine ability, a supreme technique. The space of this technique was definitely not limited to the origin martial realm, but could be limitless. The great 1,000-leaf hands and the 18 flood dragon styles could probably be like this too. Chu Yang returned in an extremely weak state. Hearing his coarse and heavy breathing like a cow's bellows, Chu Yunlong and the other two came back to their senses. Yang, this is still a origin martial realm technique. Zhong Hao screamed, as if a girl's first time had been violently snatched away. He jumped 3 feet into the air and said, "This is practically a Qi soul realm cultivation technique, an ascending soul realm cultivation technique. No, it's even higher than the heaven." Chu Yunlong agreed with this statement. The way he looked at Chu Yang had changed. It was just a cultivation method of the origin martial realm, yet Chu Yang was able to display such astonishing power. It was simply unimaginable. It was enough to scare people to death. "Howsy, you can keep screaming like a ghost. I can't take it anymore. This damned thing, I didn't expect it to be so shocking. I'm completely drained. I don't care about you guys, I'm going to sleep first." The three of them looked at each other in dismay as they watched Chu Yang's extremely exhausted figure leave. This little sheep is still complaining. How many people want to be like you? They beg their grandfathers and grandmothers, but they still can't get what they want. You still despise them. Father, mother, are you sure you gave birth to him? Your son, my little brother, that little lamb? Chu Na's eyes and mouth opened into an O shape. What did she see just now? Usually, when Chu Na said this, she would have been hit in the head. However, Liu Yi was also stunned at this moment. She looked at Chu Yunlong and asked foolishly, "Is this really my son? Is he really our son?" Chu Yunlong was also very doubtful. Was this really his son? Howsy? Seeing that they didn't answer, Chu Na vented her shock on Zhong Hao and said, "Are you sure this is your childhood friend? When did your childhood friend become so scary?" Childhood friend? Suddenly, Zhong Hao laughed loudly and said, my childhood friend, it's actually my childhood friend. Ha ha, in the future, I, Zhong Hao, can do whatever I want." I'll beat up whoever doesn't accept it. If you can't beat me, then ask my childhood friend. His loud laughter came to an abrupt end. He was knocked unconscious by Chu Yunlong's blade. Looking at Liu Yi and Chu Enei's gaze, Chu Yunlong explained his actions. I'm afraid he's gone crazy, so it's better to knock him unconscious. Chu Enei's eyes turned, but she didn't say anything. Otherwise, when her father did that to her, she would faint. Chapter 46. The next day, Chu Yang was pulled by the ear by Chu Enei as he woke up. His realm was still at the 4th level of the origin martial realm and had not recovered to the 6th level. His strength also did not increase and remained at the power of 9 tigers. With the formation of the sword Dao body, the meridians in his body had been widened by at least 10 times. The capacity and quantity of his true qi had also increased by 10 times, and the toughness of his meridians had also increased by 10 times. However, his sword Dao body was like a newborn baby. His body had not yet grown and his strength had not increased. I estimate that I will have to wait until I recover to the 6th level of the origin martial realm before the increase in strength can be seen. Chu Yang was very clear about everything that had happened to his body. On this day, Zhong Hao also came early in the morning. After seeing Chu Yang's astonishing performance last night, he had other ideas. Yang, go out for a stroll. 1,000 crystals, do you want it or not? Zhong Hao tempted as soon as he came up. Crystals were the currency of the Tianhun world. Silver and gold rank martial artists did not attach importance to them. Naturally, they were unable to become the mainstream currency of the martial artists. Crystals contained a large amount of energy and were extremely easy to absorb. Even if one did not have a martial spirit, they could still absorb the energy. The general value of crystals was 2 qi generating pills. Above crystals, there were spirit crystals and magic crystals. Spirit crystals contained a higher level of energy called spirit qi. Spirit qi came from the ascending soul realm. After the martial spirit was upgraded, the true qi would be refined and the true qi in the body would become spirit qi. The reward for the first place of the Coiling Dragon Martial Academy was 3,000 crystals, a low-grade Qi Soul Realm treasure sword, and the silver pill that Chu Yang had swallowed. The reward was the highest in all of history. Therefore, it could be said that 1,000 crystals was a bit shocking. Chu Yang was tempted. However, what he needed was not only true Qi, but also spirit-accumulating pills and spirit-nourishing pills that could replenish his mental power and physical strength. His next goal was to refine pills. This was the way of the king. Hao Zi, speak. What does this have to do with you? Otherwise, this genius will be unable to help. Hee hee. Zhong Hao laughed sinisterly. Little sheep genius, the little sheep genius that I saw last night. 7 times in one night, you are still standing. Isn't it because I want to invite such a genius to Fallen Dragon City for a round? Chu Yang said directly, tell me the details. 1,000 origin crystals, even if you were to be sold like a duck, you wouldn't be worth that much. What exactly is going on? Zhong Hao immediately frowned and slowly said, my uncle is a bodyguard who travels between Coiling Dragon Town and Fallen Dragon City. This time, he has received a mission to transport a batch of medicinal materials for the City Lord Mansion of Fallen Dragon City. I am afraid it will be somewhat dangerous. The Li family escort agency. Zhong Hao nodded. The City Lord's manor offered a reward of 5,000 origin crystals. My uncle was moved and agreed, but when he thought about it, he regretted it a little. He thought about it for a moment and felt that there was something strange about this matter. I'm afraid it's not that simple. What kind of medicinal materials are so important that the City Lord's manor actually attaches so much importance to it? Chu Yang also frowned. Coiling Dragon Town and Fallen Dragon City were not far from each other. Fallen Dragon City was a city in the border area of Coiling Dragon Town that was connected to the Great Wei State. It was only a small city in the Great Wei State. It couldn't be compared to those big cities in the hinterland of the Great Wei State. However, it was still a city with a population of more than 200,000. Including some subsidiary towns, the total population was more than 500,000 people. The life and death of these 500,000 people were in the hands of the City Lord's mana. With the City Lord's mana's strength, what kind of medicinal materials were actually so important? Chapter 47. Chu Yang naturally knew that Zhong Hao's uncle's family wasn't very harmonious. Although Zhong Hao's uncle, Li Jiaxing, was the first to make a name for himself and established a decent business, Li Jiaxing still had 3 younger brothers who were all ambitious. However, if Li Jiaxing didn't have contact with Chu Yunlong, Li Jiaxing's 3 younger brothers wouldn't have the backing of the Zhao family and the ability to go against Li Jiaxing. It's related to the Zhao family, right? Then let's go. Chu Yang couldn't ignore this and understood that Li Jiaxing was on his side. Alright, I knew this trip wouldn't be in vain, Zhong Hao laughed. As long as Chu Yang agreed, he would be relieved. Now, he only had respect for Chu Yang. Especially after last night, he was extremely shocked. He felt that Chu Yang had the ability to fight against a Qi Soul Realm opponent. As the two of them chatted and laughed, they arrived at the Li family's escort agency. In the Li family's escort agency, there were already dozens of martial artists standing in groups of 3 to 5, each of them talking. These were the experts that the Li family's escort agency had invited this time. Oh, isn't this Zhong Hao? Suddenly, among the dozens of martial artists, a young man in luxurious clothes walked over. Zhong Hao's expression was slightly ugly as he explained to Chu Yang in a low voice. This was his 3rd cousin brother, the eldest son of his 2nd uncle, Li Jiarong. His name was Li Yongfu, and he had always been at odds with him. TSK, don't tell me that the one beside you is a martial artist that you found. He hasn't even shed his hair yet. Haven't he weaned yet? Li Yongfu laughed unscrupulously. Ha 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 ha. Li Yongfu's words made the martial artists burst into laughter. You guys have eyes but can't see. This is the champion of our Coiling Dragon Martial Arts Academy's grand competition this time. Zhong Hao's face was flushed red as he shouted in anger. Ha ha ha, I have heard of the Coiling Dragon Martial Arts Academy's grand competition. The champion is just the champion of the inner sect disciples. They are just a bunch of inexperienced kids. Have you seen blood? I can beat 5 of them by myself, a 30-year-old martial artist said with a laugh. The rest of the martial artists had a look of approval as well. The Coiling Dragon Martial Institution might have an illustrious reputation in the Coiling Dragon town, but compared to these lone martial artists who had traversed the north and south, this Coiling Dragon Fate disciple was merely a flower in a greenhouse. Each of these warriors was at least at the 6th level of the primitive martial realm. Among them, there was even a warrior at the early 8th level of the primitive martial realm. Their auras were intrepid. They had all seen blood and killed people before. Suddenly, Chu Yang moved. His figure flickered like a furious Vajra and instantly appeared in front of that arrogant big man, sending a palm strike towards him. Bang! That martial artist was solidly slapped and several of his teeth were broken. His body was like a kite with a broken string as he flew out and fiercely crashed into the wall. Dense fine lines like a spider web appeared on the wall as he rolled down. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. I will set a rule for you. You can voice your opinions, but you have to be careful of your cynicism and ridicule, especially in front of me. Chu Yang was expressionless. He wanted to establish his prestige and support Zhong Hao. Silence. The hall was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. A martial artist at the peak of the 6th level of the primitive martial realm was actually slapped by Chu Yang to the point where it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Many of the martial artists were stunned. Then, a few of them suddenly became angry. He actually dared to hit someone. Don't think that we won't dare to kill you because you are from the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution. Cripple him. Break all the bones in his body. A few of the martial artists were angry. They instantly attacked and rushed towards Chu Yang. Each of them was at the peak of the 6th level of the primitive martial realm. Some of them were even at the 7th level of the primitive martial realm. It was just right. One against a group. 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 He had experienced this feeling once in the Coiling Dragon Mountain range. It was very good. He didn't mind doing it again and trampling this group of people under his feet. Bang! A martial artist was slapped by Chu Yang and screamed miserably as he fell out of the window. Bang! Another martial artist was kicked by Chu Yang and fiercely crashed into a pillar. Chapter 48. Zhong Hao, how dare you injure the martial artist invited by our clan? Li Yongfu was enraged. Li Yongfu, what did second uncle teach you? You are so uncultured. Do you know what is respect? After Chu Yang displayed his prowess, Zhong Hao calmed down and taught him a lesson without hesitation. For this trash, you even dare to offend the genius of the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution. Do you want your Li clan to lose its foothold in the Coiling Dragon town? Li Yongfu turned green and white after hearing Zhong Hao's words. He was annoyed that those martial artists were all trash. Every single one of them was useless. How could they be beaten up so badly by a teenage kid? Zhong Hao, just you wait. Li Yongfu had an ugly expression. After he spoke those harsh words, he was about to leave resentfully. Chu Yang slapped Li Yongfu away and stepped on his face. He said coldly, "Who are you trying to be arrogant in front of?" Woo woo. Li Yongfu's face was stepped on, and he couldn't speak at all. As he struggled, Chu Yang stomped his head directly into the ground, scaring the entire Li clan escort agency, but no one dared to make a sound. Soon, Li Yongfu's body was trembling, but he couldn't say a word. He could only let out a whimper. Finally, his crotch was wet and the smell of urine was emitted. A trash like you dares to be impudent in front of me. Bang! Chu Yang sent Li Yongfu flying with a kick. Li Yongfu was extremely frightened and embarrassed. He fainted and was quickly brought away by his subordinates. Satisfying, too satisfying. This bastard has never put me in his eyes since he was young. Now, he even dares to disrespect the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution. He deserves it. This is also a lesson for him to know his place. Zhong Hao laughed heartily and made a statement. After so many years of resentment, he finally vented it. The surrounding martial artists looked at Chu Yang with a different expression. They didn't dare to look down on Chu Yang like before. The name of the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution was engraved in their minds. When are we departing? Chu Yang asked Zhong Hao. We'll leave this afternoon and reach Fallen Dragon City at night. Zhong Hao replied. Chu Yang nodded. He found a place to sit down and closed his eyes to rest. Throughout the morning, more than a dozen warriors had arrived. All of them were at 6th level of the primitive martial realm or above. They were very strong. After a while, Zhong Hao had other things to do. Thank you for accepting this mission. When it was close to noon, a short but vigorous middle-aged man arrived at the door. His face was filled with vicissitudes of life, but his eyes were bright and full of expression. He was Zhong Hao's uncle, Li Jiaxing. This Li is very grateful to all of you for your help. Brother Li is too polite. This is what we do. A martial artist stepped forward and cupped his hands. Brother Li, we're just here to get some glory and make some money. With a peak 8th level primitive martial realm like you, who would dare to stroke the tiger's whiskers? That's right, unless he's tired of living. It's not appropriate, it's just that this Li has some ability. Everyone is giving me face and giving me food to eat. Li Jiaxing modestly cupped his hands and said, this time, I ask for everyone's help. Have a safe journey and let's make a fortune together. Immediately, Li Jiaxing said again, we'll depart in the afternoon. Please be prepared. During this process, Li Jiaxing nodded to Chu Yang without batting an eyelid. However, there was still some uneasiness in his eyes. Obviously, he was still worried about Chu Yang. If Chu Yang had come, it would have been better. Chu Yang didn't care. After everyone had arrived, he followed the crowd and followed the Li family's team to escort this batch of medicinal herbs. However, what made Chu Yang a little strange was that in this escort, other than Li Jiaxing's brothers didn't appear at all. This made Chu Yang's eyes narrow slightly. He felt more and more that something was wrong. The relationship between Zhong Hao and him was probably known by many people in Coiling Dragon Town, especially the Zhao family. He had a feeling that this might be another trick of the Zhao family. They used Li Jiaxing as bait and then Zhong Hao led it to him. The Zhao family's intention to kill him was already clear. Maybe I'm the real protagonist of this trip. This was not impossible. Chu Yang's intuition gave birth to a sense of crisis. And those martial artists who had lived on the edge of the blade for many years also seemed to have realized something after seeing Li Jiaxing's dignified expression. They all shut their mouths and no longer laughed. Chapter 49. Ma Jinlu, Lin Luhu, the two leaders of Coiling Dragon Village are here. I didn't expect that these are just a few carriages full of ordinary herbs. It's not worth the two leaders of Coiling Dragon Village to come here personally. Li Jiaxing's deep voice came from the front. Coiling Dragon Village. The group of warriors was in an uproar. A man's name was like a tree's shadow. Coiling Dragon Village was a famous group of bandits near the Coiling Dragon mountain range. They were very ruthless. If anyone disobeyed them, they would kill them all. The women were even more miserable. Coiling Dragon Village was surrounded by mountains and its people were very tough. Although there were many bandits, few were as ruthless as Coiling Dragon Village. Most of them just wanted to rob. As for Ma Jinlu and Lin Luhu, the two leaders of Coiling Dragon Village, no one knew their real names. They had given themselves funny names, but they were notorious. This pair of brothers were very strong. They were both experts of the late stage of the 8th stage. If they joined hands, they could easily kill an expert of the 9th stage of the origin martial realm. To these escorts, these two man-eating tigers were the biggest deterrent for them every time they carried out an escort mission. Ordinary herbs. There were more than 100 people in front of them. One of them was a burly man with a rough face. The other one was very thin and tall, like a bamboo pole. Between their eyebrows, there was a fierce look. They were the two leaders of Coiling Dragon Village, Ma Jinlu and Lin Luhu. When Ma Lanlu heard this, he instantly laughed mockingly. Li Jiaxing, you're also a big shot. You'd better speak less of such meaningless words. Otherwise, if you bully us brothers for being ignorant and provoke us, we'll kill all of you later. Our Li family escort agency and your Coiling Dragon Village have always minded our own business. During festivals, we always give you gifts. Why do you have to make things difficult for us this time? Li Jiaxing said in a deep voice. His voice was steady and powerful. Mph, cut the crap. Lin Luhu snorted. Our Coiling Dragon Village doesn't need you to tell us what to do. We don't even need to give you an explanation. Mph, so the two of you are going to fall out with our Li family escort agency? Li Jiaxing's expression was ugly. Soon after, he said in a cold voice, although our Li family escort agency has always been kind to others, we are not pushovers. Furthermore, if we die here today, your Coiling Dragon Village will be annihilated as well. You better watch out. Li Jiaxing, who are you trying to scare? Lin Luhu ridiculed. You think we don't know that this is the medicinal ingredient that Fallen Dragon City's city lord needs? If it weren't for us, we wouldn't even bother to snatch it. As the saying goes, people die in pursuit of wealth and birds die in pursuit of food. After this, do you think us brothers will still stay in this area and let some bullshit city lord kill people to establish his might? Ridiculous. Whether it was Ma Jielu or Lin Luhu, both of them were ridiculing the Fallen Dragon City Lord. They did not take him seriously at all. Li Jiaxing knew that this was not going to end well. If that's the case, then let's see who will emerge victorious today. Mph, you don't know how to appreciate favors. Since you don't want to hand it over, then don't blame us brothers for being ruthless. Little ones, kill. Immediately, a group of bandits from the Coiling Dragon Village rushed over while Ma Jielu and Lin Luhu took the lead and rushed over to kill. Kill. Li Jiaxing roared. He took a step and immediately flew up into the air. A long staff brought out a buzzing sound and a gust of violent wind as it smashed towards Ma Jielu and Lin Luhu. The two leaders of the Coiling Dragon Village took out their weapons. It was a wolf-tooth club. They let out a strange cry and went up to meet the attack. Boom! The iron staff and the wolf-tooth club fiercely clashed together. A terrifying airflow spread out from the point of contact, forming a frightening astral wind. Ha ha ha, I heard that you were taught by the deacon of the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution. You are quite capable, but it seems like this is all there is to it. Ma Jielu laughed loudly and entangled Li Jiaxing. Ha ha ha, that's just an undeserved reputation. You actually dare to be so rampant. Lin Luhu also laughed and ridiculed. Lin Luhu was a tall and sturdy man. He swept his wolf tooth club horizontally. The Li family escort agency's guards and martial artists who were swept by the wolf tooth club had their bones broken. What should we do? Those two are too strong. If no one stops them, I'm afraid we will all be slaughtered. A martial artist said with a pale face. The rest of the martial artists also said with lingering fear. They did not expect to encounter the two leaders of the Coiling Dragon village here. This escort mission was indeed not simple. Chapter 50. The massacre began. Lin Luhu unleashed a massacre. He was like a hungry wolf that had charged into a flock of sheep. He laughed strangely as he swung his spiked club, creating a gust of wind. Every time he swung his club, a martial artist would be smashed into pieces, instantly dying. 7 or 8 people died at his hands. Li Jiaxing was entangled by Ma Jinlu. Although he was tyrannical, Ma Jinlu was also a late 8th level origin martial realm warrior, only 1 level lower than Li Jiaxing. Li Jiaxing couldn't kill Lin Luhu in a short time, nor could he get rid of Ma Jinlu. He could only angrily look at Lin Luhu's massacre. Xiu. Chu Yang moved, his sword moved, man and sword became one. He was silent, as if he didn't exist on the scene, or as if he was just a gust of wind during the fight. The sword in his hand was like a poisonous snake hunting for food, directly aiming at Lin Luhu's heart. Wind-chasing life-stealing sword, first move, heart-piercing move. Fast, accurate, steady, strange, poisonous, very sudden, but dang. The sword fiercely stabbed the mace and a crisp sound burst out. How is this possible? Both of them thought at the same time. Chu Yang's sword was bound to succeed, but it was unexpectedly blocked. Lin Luhu's eyes flashed with a trace of astonishment, his whole body emitted a cold qi, only 4th level origin martial realm, how can his sword technique be so strange and frightening? Moreover, his strength is surprisingly great, the strength of 6 tigers. What shocked Lin Luhu the most was that Chu Yang's Zhen Qi was of extremely high quality, the sword Qi he formed was even more terrifying and extremely sharp. Both of them only met face to face, but Chu Yang read many things from each other's eyes. Bastard, I was going to kill all of these hindrances first, then take your life. I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to me first. I have always been on guard against this little poisonous snake, but I never thought that I would almost die in his hands. I was scared half to death. Fortunately, I didn't underestimate him, otherwise, I'm afraid I would be a dead man now. At this moment, Lin Luhu's eyes were filled with shock. 4th level of the origin martial realm, it is consistent with the information I obtained. The initial stage of the sword Dao body has dropped from the peak of the origin martial realm to the 4th level of the origin martial realm. However, this sword is actually so powerful. A haze flashed across his eyes, and he suddenly made up his mind, but no matter what kind of genius you are, you will die in my hand. A sinister smile flashed across Lin Luhu's face. Killing geniuses and what not is my favorite. You're from the Zhao clan. You're here to kill me, right? Chu Yang's words caused the surrounding martial artists to be stunned. The Zhao family. He actually knows. What a terrifying insight. He actually knew so much just by meeting me face to face. Lin Luhu's expression changed. He coldly snorted and said, "What kind of plaything is the Zhao family? I don't even put the fallen dragon city's city lord in my eyes. A mere Zhao family wants to order me around." No longer giving Chu Yang a chance to speak, Lin Luhu's mace arrived in front of Chu Yang. It looked like Chu Yang's brain was about to burst. Cutting waist style. Chu Yang's sword slashed out horizontally. The 4th style of the wind-chasing life-seizing sword technique. Before the sword arrived, a sword wind swept out first. Boom. The two collided. 2 waves of true qi fiercely collided with each other. It spread out like a wave and set off a burst of sand and stones. Deng deng deng. Chu Yang retreated a few steps. His current strength was weaker than Lin Luhu's by at least 2 tigers' worth of strength. If he was at the peak of the 6th level of the origin martial realm, then this sword strike would have chopped him into 2 pieces. You! Lin Luhu's pupils suddenly shrank. He clearly knew Chu Yang's strength. But that sword wind had swept over like a knife cutting his hand. It had been very ingenious. So, he hadn't been able to erupt with his full strength. In this head-on clash, he was at the late stage of the 8th level of the origin martial realm and had the strength of 8 tigers. He was actually forced to retreat 2 steps. Too amazing. Sure enough, he was a genius, a monster. Coupled with such a keen mind and such terrifying insight, Lin Luhu didn't even say half a word. He had already guessed his other purpose and knew that he had a great relationship with the Zhao clan. If this kid doesn't die, I will die without a doubt. The Zhao clan will also be annihilated. Chapter 51. Lin Luhu's killing intent intensified. Despite his rough appearance, his mind was meticulous and sinister. Otherwise, how could he become the second-in-command of Coiling Dragon Stronghold? The mace swung with all its might, became even faster and heavier. Anyone who was hit by it would definitely be smashed into a meat patty. The whistling sound seemed to have split the air in half. Lin Luhu stomped his foot, creating a crack in the ground. His huge body instantly flew into the air, raised high, and smashed down ruthlessly. An ear-piercing sound reverberated around Chu Yang. The intense astral wind caused by the huge mace made him feel pain. In the face of life and death, Chu Yang was incomparably calm. Although his strength was slightly inferior, it wasn't just a contest of strength. Swoosh! Chu Yang's figure moved and disappeared like a gust of wind. In a short moment, Lin Luhu actually lost sight of him. Boom! Lin Luhu erupted with all his strength. This attack couldn't be retracted halfway and smashed into the ground. Swish! The third sword came and went like a ghost. It was as if a gust of wind blew and the sword arrived. Brain-piercing form came from the side, wanting to pierce through his head. Lin Luhu didn't have time to react and hurriedly blocked the attack with his mace. Swish! The fourth strike was the piercing throat style. However, it wasn't from the front, but from the side. Rip! Lin Luhu was terrified. He couldn't care about anything else and hurriedly lowered the mace. His face and ears were injured by his own mace, but he didn't care at all. What kind of sword technique is this? Lin Luhu was completely flustered. Under Chu Yang's sword technique, he was like a paralyzed person. Brain-piercing form. Throat-piercing form. Waist-cutting form. Wind-killing form. Chu Yang used the Great Thousand Leaf Hands and swapped out 4 arms at the same time. It was as if each arm was using a wind-chasing life-reaping sword. Each sword was faster than the previous and more terrifying than the previous one. The power of the sword and the sword overlapped, increasing the strength by several times. Not only was the speed and the move superimposed, but the strength was also superimposed. Poochie. Lin Luhu's eyes were filled with fear. He wanted to use his mace to block, but it was too late. His whole body was cut in half by Chu Yang. In an instant, everyone's eyes turned to this side. They were dumbfounded. The one who was cut in half was actually Lin Luhu. Compared to Chu Yang, the so-called champion of the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution's grand competition, Lin Luhu had been famous for many years. He was the second head of the Coiling Dragon Stronghold and had an illustrious reputation in the vicinity. However, he had actually died in Chu Yang's hands. This result had shocked all of them. Genius, this was the so-called genius. Indeed, it was hard to imagine. Many martial artists sucked in a breath of cold air and swallowed their saliva. A 4th-level primitive martial realm killing an 8th-level primitive martial realm, is this true? A martial artist said what was on everyone's mind. When Lin Luhu became famous, his ferocious name could stop children from crying. However, this Chu Yang was only a few years old. He was only 16 or 17 years old, yet he was able to cut Lin Luhu into 2 with a single slash of his sword. Second brother, Ma Lanlu shouted in grief and indignation, Li Jiaxing, from now on, Your Li family and I will not rest until one of us is dead. Ma Lanlu roared and rushed towards Li Jiaxing. He was like a crazy demon as he swung his mace at Li Jiaxing. Courting death. Do you think you can make a comeback? Li Jiaxing saw that Chu Yang had killed Lin Luhu and was immediately overjoyed. The iron rod in his hand suddenly sped up a bit. It was like a crazy whirlwind, almost without a trace, forming a storm. Li Jiaxing's strength was above Ma Lanlu's. Ma Lanlu had become chaotic because of Lin Luhu's death. Although he became more violent, he was already out of order. Sure enough, in less than 10 moves, Li Jiaxing chopped with his rod and killed Ma Lanlu. After Ma Lanlu and Lin Luhu were killed, the remaining bandits of the Coiling Dragon stronghold immediately dispersed. However, Li Jiaxing was already enraged by the killing. He immediately shouted, "Kill all these bastards for me." How could these bandits, who had lost their leader, be a match for the hired warriors? It only took a moment for them to be killed. After killing all the bandits, everyone began to silently clean up the battlefield. After this incident, everyone knew that this matter was not simple. It involved the Zhao family, the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution, and the Fallen Dragon City. Many thanks to Second Young Master for saving me, Li Jiaxing, from danger. Li Jiaxing kept his saber and was abnormally respectful to Chu Yang. His eyes were filled with amazement. He never thought that this young Chu Yang would be so amazing. "Uncle Li, you don't have to be so polite. Zhong Hao and I have known each other since childhood. Lending a hand is what I should do." Chu Yang estimated in his heart that this batch of herbs was not simple. Geniuses were usually very arrogant and would not put others in their eyes. Li Jiaxing was originally worried that his previous neglect had offended Chu Yang. Now, he was completely relieved. No matter what, Second Young Master's help this time is a good deed. Wait until we reach the Fallen Dragon City. Second Young Master, don't refuse this little gift of mine. Chapter 52. Half River Rustle, Half River Red. Dusk, sunset. A long shadow was left behind by the setting sun. Following the Coiling Dragon River that surrounded Fallen Dragon City, the Li clan's caravan finally arrived at Fallen Dragon City before dusk. The Coiling Dragon River could be said to be a natural moat for this city. The city walls were very tall, at least a dozen meters high. Even at dusk, the streets were still bustling with activity. Ever since they met the bandits of Coiling Dragon Village, their journey had been very smooth. They did not encounter anything else and smoothly arrived at Fallen Dragon City. When the caravan arrived outside the city, Li Jiaxing immediately cupped his hands to the crowd and said, "Everyone, you have worked hard along the way. The rewards that I promised everyone will not be less. Those who were injured or died, there will definitely be extra compensation. Brother Li is too polite. This is what we should do." The many cultivators expressed their agreement. No matter what, although the escort this time was strange, they had only met a group of bandits. After that, they arrived at Fallen Dragon City smoothly. Furthermore, the rewards were much better than before. The caravan started to line up to enter Fallen Dragon City. Halt, this is a routine inspection. At the city gate, a fierce general in his 30s blocked the caravan's path. He looked at Li Jiaxing and immediately said rudely, "What is in here? Open it all." "Sir, we are the Li clan's escort agency of Coiling Dragon Town. This is a batch of herbs that we are escorting on behalf of the City Lord's residence." Li Jiaxing mentioned the City Lord's residence. At the same time, he took the opportunity to bribe the general. "I don't care who you are. I will check everything to see if there are any prohibited items." The general directly overturned the benefits that Li Jiaxing had bribed him with. He directly gave an order, making Li Jiaxing feel very embarrassed. "Sir, please don't joke around. If this joke gets out of hand, it will not be fun anymore." Li Jiaxing's tone could not help but change. "Are you threatening me?" The general smiled coldly and said without a care, "Brothers, go and search. If you find anything, the general will definitely reward you greatly." General's residence. Li Jiaxing's face sank as he thought to himself, "Not good, it's actually someone from the general's residence." The Fallen Dragon City's City Lord's office and the General's office were two different systems. Generally speaking, one was for civil affairs, and the other was for the army. There were many cities in the Great Wei state that were like this. Firstly, the distinction between the army and the people was very clear. Secondly, the two of them supervised each other and restrained each other. Chu Yang looked at all of this, and his worry deepened. Fallen Dragon City's General's Mansion and City Lord's Mansion actually had a conflict because of this. What exactly was in this batch of medicinal ingredients? Zhong Hao's uncle, Li Jiaxing, was simply courting death this time. How could he get involved in such a matter? Swish. Just as the general gave the order, there was a sharp piercing sound. A sharp arrow pierced through the air and instantly pierced through the general's head. Bang! The officer's head exploded, and red and white brain matter splattered all over the ground. How dare you? You're just a little general, yet you don't even put our city lord's mansion in your eyes. A cold voice transmitted over, everyone from the Li family's escort agency. I'm sorry, I'm late. Everyone looked over and saw a group of people galloping over on horseback. They reined in their horses and stopped when they were near. The person in the lead was a young master who appeared to be around 20 years old. He was wearing a magnificent robe and holding a divine bow. He dismounted from his horse and casually threw the bow and arrow to an attendant behind him. Then he walked over in large strides. I don't dare, I don't dare. I didn't expect that the eldest young master would actually come in person this time. Li Jiaxing bowed with a humble attitude and was extremely respectful. Chapter 53. Chu Yang also glanced at Yi Feiyang. This Yi Feiyang was 24 or 25 years old and his cultivation was at the peak of the 8th level of the primitive martial realm. He secretly said in his heart, that general was killed just like that. It seems that the conflict between the City Lord's mansion and the General's mansion is very intense. Not only him, but many of the accompanying martial artists were also shocked. This was a huge whirlpool. If they were not careful, they would be crushed to pieces. My father is quite busy, so I can only come. This time, you have all worked hard to bring the herbs here, Yi Feiyang said with a smile on his face. This time, we encountered the obstruction of Coiling Dragon Village. If it wasn't for Coiling Dragon Martial Courtyard's young Master Chu, I'm afraid we would be in danger. Li Jiaxing seemed to want to introduce Chu Yang and Yi Feiyang to each other. So you are a disciple of Coiling Dragon Martial Courtyard. You are more or less a disciple of Five Elements sect. No wonder. Yi Feiyang couldn't help but look at Chu Yang. His pupils immediately shook. He was only at the 4th level of the primitive martial realm, yet he could make Li Jiaxing, who was at the peak of the 8th level of the primitive martial realm, hold him in such high regard. Could it be that he is stronger than Li Jiaxing? If so, this Chu Yang was amazing. Suddenly, Yi Feiyang thought of a person. Brother Chu, your elder brother is the famous great genius Chu. He is the pride of our Coiling Dragon Town and Fallen Dragon City. When Yi Feiyang opened his mouth, the accompanying martial artists couldn't help but be shocked. They didn't know Chu Yang's specific identity, but the name Chu Fei resounded like thunder in their ears. Now that they knew, they were even more shocked. In their memories, Chu Fei's younger brother seemed to be called Little Sheep. He didn't seem to be as amazing as the one in front of them. It is my elder brother. Chu Yang could only cup his fists and say, Greetings, Brother Yi. Neither servile nor overbearing. Yi Feiyang slightly sized up Chu Yang again. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart, what a good young man. Brother Chu, I'm afraid you are already curious about the strangeness of this herb. Chu Yang was slightly stunned. He didn't expect Yi Feiyang to say it so unscrupulously. Maybe he was giving face to his elder brother. But I'm a little puzzled. There are quite a few people who have designs on this carriage, but they're intimidated by Brother Yi's prestige and only dare to do some dirty things. Brother Chu, there's a hidden meaning in your words. Yi Feiyang frowned. Chu Yang didn't mind throwing the Zhao family into the fire. Brother Yi, why don't you think about it? How could a mere Coiling Dragon village dare to look down on the City Lord Manor? Looks like there are a lot of stingers. Killing intent flashed across Yi Feiyang's eyes. He immediately laughed and said, "Brother Chu, do you want to know what is really inside this medicinal ingredient? There's no need for that." Chu Yang didn't want to get into trouble. Haha. Yi Fei Yang laughed heartily. He walked straight into the carriage of medicinal herbs and took out a storage ring from a secret compartment in the carriage. Then, he took out a Buddha statue and a bottle of pills. Joyful Buddha. The moment Chu Yang saw that Buddha statue, his eyes couldn't help but narrow. The joyful Buddha was only owned by Tantric Buddhism or Tantric Buddhism. Only Tibetan Buddhist temples worshipped it. It was a special artistic form of Buddha statues. In the Buddhist doctrine, the word joy did not refer to joy. Instead, it referred to fearlessness, anger, ferocious strength, and cruel means. It referred to the feeling of joy when one captured a pagan, trampled on them, and trampled them under one's feet. Chapter 54. The shapes of the Buddha of joy were very rich and colorful. Their appearances were strange and hard to describe. Some were ugly and ferocious, some had a human body and a beast's face, some had multiple heads, some had multiple hands, some had human heads hanging from their waists, some were stepping on young boys and girls lying on the ground, some were single, and some were hugging each other. They were made of gold, silver, and copper, as well as wood and stone carvings. There were also clay carvings and painted carvings. At this moment, this Buddha statue had a man sitting cross-legged with his right leg curled up and his left leg curled up inside his right leg. The woman was facing the man with her legs wide open and her plump buttocks sitting on the man's left leg. Their forearms were hugging each other and their chests were tightly pressed together. Their naked bodies were in a state of ecstasy. Most people thought that the Buddha of joy was about indulgence, and the monks who practiced this kind of Buddhism were mostly like this. There were very few who practiced the Buddha of joy purely. Looking at this Buddha statue, Chu Yang remembered an old incident. 10 years ago, a silver monk escaped to Coiling Dragon Town. Later on, he harmed many girls there and caused chaos in Coiling Dragon Town. After that, there was no news of this silver monk. Looks like this silver monk died in Coiling Dragon Town in the end. Chu Yang thought to himself. That's right. Yi Fei Yang laughed and said, "Brother Chu, you have good eyes." He raised the porcelain bottle in his hand and said, "Brother Chu, you must know the pill inside, right?" Chu Yang's eyes widened. Could it be the pill of joy? The pill of joy was a kind of miraculous pill. After taking it, even if one didn't practice martial arts, as long as he had sex with a female martial artist in the spirit realm, he could directly break through to the spirit realm. It was incredible. It was said that if a female martial artist was in the ascending soul realm, she could even break through to the ascending soul realm, but no one knew the details. The pill of joy, it was actually the pill of joy. No wonder the Zhao family dared to take such a big risk and touch the whiskers of the city lord's mansion. The general's mansion also didn't hesitate to become enemies with the city lord's mansion. I'm afraid that the information the Zhao family received was not accurate. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as simple as Ma Lanlu and Lin Luhu. Chu Yang broke out in a cold sweat. This time, it was too dangerous. It was as if he had unconsciously taken a trip to the gates of hell. Li Jiaxing's entire body was trembling. Evidently, he understood the dangers involved. The City Lord Manor was truly audacious this time around. They actually only allowed Li Jiaxing to escort them. However, they had won the gamble. Most probably, their opponents would never have expected this. Haha. Yi Fei Yang was in high spirits at the moment. Naturally, he saw Li Jiaxing's expression. He laughed and said, "Escort Li, you've successfully sent the Mandkesvara Buddha to Fallen Dragon City. We won't treat you badly this time. Don't worry, let's enter the city first." After that, a group of people entered the city. The medicinal pills that were escorted were all given to Li Jiaxing. Only the Buddha statue and the bottle of joy pills were taken away by Yi Fei Yang. Chu Yang didn't know how much the rest of the people had received. However, he had received a total of 10,000 crystals. Such a reward was extremely shocking. For Chu Yang, it could be said that he had become rich overnight. Even the core disciples of the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution probably didn't have as many crystals as him. At the same time, Yi Feiyang also invited Chu Yang to participate in the auction held by the Sunset Chamber of Commerce in 3 days. After that, Chu Yang parted ways with Li Jiaxing and the others and found an inn to settle down. After dinner, Chu Yang prepared to start cultivating. He estimated that he would need roughly 1,000 crystals. It would be enough for him to quickly restore his cultivation to the peak of the 6th level of the origin martial realm. After that, he would still have 12,000 crystals left. For others, crystals were only used to assist in cultivation. However, for Chu Yang, as long as he had enough crystals, it meant that he would have enough medicinal pills. It meant that he could continuously advance by leaps and bounds and break through layers of realms. With crystals, he would have medicinal pills. Realms were not a problem at all. These 12,000 crystals should be enough for him to break through to the peak of the 9th level of the origin martial realm. Audacious! Who dares to break into the City Lord Manor? Chu Yang was about to enter a meditative state to cultivate when suddenly, a loud shout appeared in the sky above the city and spread far and wide. Chapter 55. Coiling Dragon Martial Arts Institution's Dean, Nangong Xiao, was only at the 3rd layer of the Qi Soul realm. Chu Yang's father, Chu Yunlong, was only at the 2nd layer of the Qi Soul realm. Excluding Coiling Dragon Martial Arts Institution and Zhao family, there were not many people in Coiling Dragon Town who were at the Qi Soul realm. Every one of them could be said to be a supreme existence. Naturally, Fallen Dragon City did not lack Ascending Soul Realm experts. However, to Chu Yang, Ascending Soul Realm experts were a terrifying existence that he had never seen before. Ascending Soul Realm experts had made a move. Fallen Dragon City would definitely not be peaceful. At this moment, Chu Yang seemed to understand why Yi Feiyang had publicized the Joy Pill at the city gate and even invited him to participate in the auction of the Sunset Merchant Guild 3 days later. It was not to give face to him or his brother, but to spread the news that the City Lord Mansion was going to auction the Joy Pill. The Joy Pill was a pill that even the City Lord Mansion did not have the power to monopolize. The consequences were too severe. Therefore, this step could be said to be brilliant. If you wanted the Joy Pill, you could come to the auction. This way, the pressure on the City Lord Mansion would be greatly reduced. At this moment, the roar that came from the City Lord Mansion meant that someone had sneaked in and alerted the Ascending Soul Realm experts. Everyone, there are a total of 10 Joy Pills. 3 days later, they will be auctioned at the Sunset Merchant Guild. If anyone dares to cause trouble, kill without mercy. A majestic and loud voice resounded in every corner of Fallen Dragon City. Every dark corner could hear it clearly. Instantly, the entire city was shaken. Joy Pill, it was actually the Joy Pill. 3 days later, the Joy Pill would be auctioned at the Sunset Merchant Guild. This news spread throughout the city in an instant. After that, all the city gates of Sunset City were opened overnight. Many people ran in all directions, obviously spreading the news. Tonight, Fallen Dragon City did not sleep. It was not that Chu Yang was not interested in the Joy Pill, but it was something that he could not touch at the moment because he did not have the strength to do so. One day, I will also step into the Ascending Soul Realm. It won't be long. Chu Yang let out a long sigh of relief. Only after coming to the Fallen Dragon City did he realize how small and weak he was. In Fallen Dragon City, the most important thing is to recover one's strength. Otherwise, without any strength, it would be too dangerous. We would only be at the mercy of others. After all, strength was the most important thing. Chu Yang's current strength was only at the 4th level of the primitive martial realm. If he walked around the Fallen Dragon City, it was estimated that anyone who did not see eye to eye with him would make a move. Recovering to the 6th level of the primitive martial realm was the most appropriate. Chu Yang took out the essence crystals and started cultivating. The origin crystals contained a very vigorous energy. It was just that piece after piece of origin crystal fell into his hands, they lost their luster almost instantly. This kind of devouring speed was simply shocking. An ordinary martial artist could use a piece of origin crystal for at least 10 days. But in Chu Yang's hands, it was practically done in the blink of an eye. 100 pieces of crystals. 200 crystals. 300 crystals. After absorbing the energy of 1,000 origin crystals, Chu Yang recovered to the 5th level of the primitive martial realm. Once again, he condensed the 5th lotus platform in his dantian. Time passed by minute, second by second, and the crystals were quickly consumed. Boom! After 1,000 origin crystals, Chu Yang consumed a total of 3,000 origin crystals to condense the 6th lotus platform and recover to the peak of the 6th level of the primitive martial realm. At this moment, the true qi in his body overflowed and suddenly erupted with a huge aura that directly broke through the roof of the inn. Clang clang clang, it was as if every cell in Chu Yang's body, every flesh and blood was like a sword, emitting countless sword sounds. At the same time, his body also emitted crackling sounds. His skin, flesh, tendons, bones, and internal organs were all vibrating. The sound of thunder was extremely clear, accompanied by the sound of tigers and leopards. Tiger-leopard thunder sound. Roar roar roar. After recovering to the peak of the 6th level of the primitive martial realm, a fierce tiger appeared behind Chu Yang. The strength of 6 tigers. The strength of 7 tigers. The strength of 8 tigers. The strength of 9 tigers. His strength also recovered to the strength of 9 tigers in an instant, but this was just the beginning. Another fierce tiger rushed out, the strength of 10 fierce tigers. The 10 tigers quickly fused and transformed into the power of 1 elephant. After that, more and more tigers continued to appear. There were a total of 15 tigers, transforming into the power of 1 elephant and 5 tigers. When all of them were added together, it was the power of 2 elephants and 5 tigers. In other words, it was the power of 2 elephants and a half. The strength of 2 elephants and a half actually increased by so much. Chu Yang himself was shocked. His father was at the 2nd level of the Chi Soul realm and he only had the strength of 2 elephants. Now, he had actually reached the strength of 2 elephants and a half. In terms of pure strength, he had even surpassed an ordinary 2nd level Chi Soul realm martial artist. Amazing, simply amazing. Chapter 56. For the first time, Chu Yang felt the terror of his sword body. If he didn't experience it himself, he wouldn't believe that it was the power of 2.5 elephants. He was only a 6th level origin martial realm martial artist. If people knew about this, they would probably scream in their sleep in the middle of the night. The inn was used to the commotion caused by cultivation. There were many martial artists like Chu Yang who caused trouble and destroyed the inn. However, after these martial artists broke through, they were usually very happy and went to ask for compensation. Usually, they would get more compensation than before. Naturally, Chu Yang quickly became one of them. Naturally, he wasn't stingy. Soon after, the inn gave him another room. After a night of silence, Chu Yang woke up full of energy. He had some thoughts about the joy pill. After all, he now had the power of 2.5 elephants, so he felt that he was qualified to get involved. However, he was still clear-headed. It was just his ego being inflated. In the fight for the joy pill, the Chi Soul realm was too low, not to mention him. If he met an ascending Soul realm martial artist, he would probably be crushed to death. A new day began. Along with the rise of the sun in the east, Fallen Dragon City was more noisy and lively than ever. Martial artists were talking about the joy pill and the City Lord's mansion. I didn't expect that the City Lord's mansion would get the joy pill. It's a pity that this joyous pill has nothing to do with us. If we could obtain the joyous pill and find a woman at the Chi Soul realm, we would be able to immediately advance to the Chi Soul realm. This kind of method of advancement is extremely joyous. Just thinking about it makes me unable to stop myself. Don't be wishful thinking. Even if we get the joy pill, it will be very difficult to find a woman in the Chi Soul realm. Many martial artists were talking about it. Most of them were sighing and could only be envious. Then, they were heartlessly watching the fun. Hehe, you didn't see it. Last night, several famous ascending Soul realm martial artists sneaked into the City Lord's mansion and fought. The entire City Lord's mansion is now a mess. Not only that, I heard that at least 20 Chi Soul realm martial artists died in the City Lord's mansion last night. The joy pill moves people. I heard that the Sunset City Lord has come personally to ask for a joy pill for his only son. My goodness, if the Sunset City Lord wants a joy pill, then all the city lords around us will come. What's so strange about that? Who doesn't have a disappointing son? Especially for these big shots, it's normal for them to have a spoiled brat or a piece of trash. When Chu Yang heard the news, his desire to get his hands on the joy pill was extinguished. The cat claws in his heart were chopped off. Even the city lord of Sunset City was here. The influence of the joy pill was far beyond his imagination. From Chu Yang's point of view, Fallen Dragon City can only be regarded as a counter-level city at most. And, Sunset City is a big province of the Great Wei State. There is only one word difference between the two. But, they are not of the same weight. Anyway, Chu Yang didn't know what level the city lord of Sunset City was at. He estimated that ascending Soul Realm martial artists were nothing in front of the city lord of Sunset City. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. The news of the joy pill gradually spread far and wide, forming a huge storm. Many famous ascending Soul Realm martial artists came one after another. However, the appearance of the city lord of Sunset City made the entire Fallen Dragon City calm down. No one dared to be presumptuous. The reason for this should be that the city lord of Fallen Dragon City used the joy pill to establish a connection with the city lord of Sunset City. With the city lord of Sunset City supporting them, no one dared to be presumptuous. Chapter 57. The Sunset Chamber of Commerce was naturally not an ordinary chamber of commerce. If an ordinary chamber of commerce wanted to auction the joy pill, they would not be able to hold their ground. Chu Yang did not have a clear idea of what the Sunset Chamber of Commerce was like. He only knew that it was very strong. In a big city like the Sunset City, the Sunset Chamber of Commerce could also hold an auction, so the Fallen Dragon City was naturally not a problem. Naturally, it was not difficult to find such a chamber of commerce. Even if you were stingy and asked for directions, you would still be able to find it very quickly. Chu Yang followed the flow of warriors and easily found the auction house of the Sunset Chamber of Commerce in the Fallen Dragon City. The auction house was magnificent. Normally, the Sunset Chamber of Commerce was very lively. Today, it was even more lively. A large number of warriors were pouring into the auction house of the Sunset Chamber of Commerce. There were many people selling masks at the entrance. Brother, buy a mask, kill and set fire to the golden belt. This brother, please buy a mask. It's the best way to hide and escape. This was a beautiful scene in the auction house. Not many people would mind or stop such a public shouting. Everyone was well aware of this matter. The strength of the people selling masks was not low. At least for Chu Yang, they were at the 8th or 9th level of the primitive martial realm. The price of the mask was also ridiculously expensive, 10 crystals. However, the craftsmanship was very exquisite. Chu Yang didn't want to buy it at first, but seeing so many martial artists casually buying one, and some even equipped their own, such actions didn't attract any attention. He thought for a moment, and bought one as well. He directly brought it with him, and then entered the auction house. To Chu Yang, the entrance fee was also very high, 100 pieces of crystals. Robbers don't come this fast. Chu Yang could only complain. He felt that he had completely become a country bumpkin. This was a very bad feeling and experience. After entering, he sat down, waited and observed. He was only in an ordinary seat in the auction house. After half an hour, he felt waves of storm-like auras continuously entering the auction house, entering one VIP box after another. Some of the auras were as heavy as mountains and seas, and even as heavy as stars. Just a trace of the aura was released, and Chu Yang was pressured to the point that he could not breathe. After about an hour of entering the auction house, the auction finally began. Bang! The sound of a wooden mallet hitting the table resounded throughout the entire auction house. A green-robed old man appeared on the auction stage. The wooden mallet in his hand fell down, emitting an incomparably loud sound like the beating of a huge drum. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend the Sunset Merchant Guild's auction today. I believe that, as usual, the auction organized by our auction house will not disappoint everyone. The white-robed old man said slowly. As for the rules of the auction, I believe that all of you are already clear about them. This old man will not repeat them here. Bang! The green-robed old man slammed the gavel down and announced, "Now, the auction officially begins." After saying that, the old man smiled, "I know that all of you are here for the joy pill. The second round will begin with the first joy pill. Let's warm up the atmosphere first." At this time, there was a servant girl with exquisite curves who was extremely moving. She walked forward with a silver plate in her hands. The green-robed old man removed the red cloth covering the silver plate. It was a Buddha statue. Chapter 58. This, Chu Yang's eyes widened in shock. The Mahamayuri Sutra was actually so extraordinary. Looking at the Buddha statue on the auction stage, his heart instantly burned with passion. He had to get this Buddha statue no matter what. It definitely had a great relationship with the Mahamayuri Sutra. The Buddha statue was severely damaged, as if it had 3 heads and 6 arms, but it was all damaged, with no hands or head. Perhaps only Chu Yang could faintly see such a feeling. Below the Buddha statue was a 5-colored lotus platform, which was almost exactly the same as the 5-colored lotus platform condensed in Chu Yang's dantian. This made him shocked. Could it be that this damaged Buddha statue is the Buddha statue of the Mahamayuri Sutra? At the same time, he was also a little anxious. Today, he had mostly come to watch the show. If it was to bid, he didn't have the capital to do so. His reward yesterday was 10,000 origin crystals, which were specially given to him by the city lord, but he had already used up 4,000. Adding the 3,000 from the martial arts tournament, he only had a total of 9,000 origin crystals. And they were all low-grade origin crystals. Origin crystals were also divided into high, middle, and low-grade, but it wasn't obvious. 10 low-grade origin crystals were equivalent to 1 mid-grade origin crystal, and 100 mid-grade origin crystals were equivalent to 1 high-grade origin crystal. 9,000 low-grade origin crystals, in this kind of auction house, facing those Chi Soul Tier warriors and even ascending Soul Tier warriors, he was no different from a beggar. Anxious, he could only be anxious. Chu Yang was very helpless. Everyone, today's joyous pill is the finale. After all, the joyous pill is related to Buddha. Therefore, in the first round of the auction today, we will start with Buddha. At the same time, this Buddha statue can also be considered as a very good meaning, to obtain Buddha and obtain joy. This green-robed elder was really good at bullshitting. Such a badly damaged Buddha statue could make him talk about the so-called meaning. Everyone, don't just look at how badly damaged this Buddha statue is. It's just a piece of dog shit. However, the item that the Sunset Merchant Guild is able to take out definitely has its origins. I can tell everyone with certainty that the original owner of this damaged Buddha statue is the one who created the joyous pill. Hua. There was an uproar in the auction house, but it quickly calmed down. The Buddha statue was too damaged, and it had no value at all. At this moment, Chu Yang's heart sank. This Buddha statue actually had this kind of relationship with the joyous pill. If this was the case, then he basically had no chance. The only thing he could hope for was that not too many people would care about this Buddha statue. In his opinion, the Sunset Merchant Guild had not discovered anything special about the Buddha statue, which was why they could only give such an introduction. Otherwise, with this old man's eloquence, he could have at least said a few more things. "Let the auction begin," the azure-clothed old man said in a clear voice. "This Buddha statue's base price is 5,000 low-grade essence crystals. Everyone can start bidding. 5,000 low-grade origin crystals, fuck you." This price was actually very low, so low that it couldn't be any lower. However, Chu Yang cursed in his heart. This was a little too expensive. To him, it was naturally too expensive, but to the many people in the auction house, it was at most pocket money for their children. It was really infuriating to compare with others. 5,500 low-grade essence crystals. Chu Yang gritted his teeth and still made a struggle. He was the first to shout out, like a beggar clamoring in front of a millionaire. He felt very vexed in his heart. Beggar. As soon as Chu Yang finished speaking, A sharp and unkind voice came out from a VIP box, ridiculing Chu Yang and ridiculing him. Then, he started bidding. I bid 5,600 essence crystals. 5,700 essence crystals. Chu Yang added another 100 essence crystals. 5,800 essence crystals. The person in the VIP box said again. 5,900 essence crystals. 6,000 essence crystals. 6,100 essence crystals. Chapter 59. No more, no less. Every time, that VIP box would only add 100 pieces of low-grade origin crystals to Chu Yang. It was obvious that he was deliberately humiliating Chu Yang. I'll give you one more piece. I'll bully you. Let's see what you can do. Looks like you're really a beggar. The voice from the box once again fell into Chu Yang's ears. Blood rushed to his face. After his fury, he calmed down and shouted, 10,000 pieces, 20,000 pieces. Again. Chu Yang's eyes flickered. He couldn't tolerate this. If you want to play, then let's play. If I don't die, then I'm your son. His voice became even calmer, indifferently raising the price. 200,000 pieces of low-grade origin crystals. If Chu Yang won the bid and didn't have the ability to pay these 200,000 pieces of low-grade origin crystals, it was very likely that his head would be separated from his body. This was definitely not a joke. Now, it was a game with his heartbeat. Chu Yang bet that the guy in the VIP box would definitely be angered by him. Hooah! There was an uproar in the auction house at this time. 10,000 pieces of Yuanjing crystal was neither painful nor itchy for most of the people present. However, 200,000 pieces of Yuanjing crystal was not a small amount either. Unexpectedly, someone was willing to pay such a high price for a mere broken Buddha statue. 400,000 pieces of low-grade origin crystals. A disdainful voice came from the VIP box. This voice was very young, about the same age as Chu Yang. Then, it once again mocked Chu Yang. Beggar, I want to see how capable you are to dare to challenge me. Chu Yang became even calmer, and his voice was even more indifferent. 800,000 pieces of low-grade origin crystals, directly doubled. Then, he looked towards that VIP box and provoked, beggar, is it? Then I want to see who the fuck is the beggar today. What right do you have to challenge me? Hong. There was a conflict. Suddenly, there was an uproar in the auction house. Many gazes instantly gathered on Chu Yang. Is this a competition of aura? Is this a competition of who has more courage? Whoever has the upper hand, when the time comes to bid for the elixir of joy, they will use this kind of aura and courage to oppress the nerves of other bidders. Or was he just being angry? No one was stupid enough to think so. Therefore, many eyes were sizing up Chu Yang, trying to guess his identity. In an instant, he had become the center of attention in the auction house. However, his indifferent and calm appearance didn't match with his plain clothes. However, martial artists were rarely noble. In the auction house, there were often some who looked like beggars, but in the end, they were unbelievably rich. They would directly overwhelm everyone with astonishing bidding prices and successfully bid for what they wanted. Especially since Chu Yang was wearing a mask, it was even more difficult to measure. You're courting death. How dare you shout at me? Zhong Ming, the third son of Luo Yun City's city lord. As soon as the young man in the VIP box spoke, someone immediately called out his identity. Luo Yun City was a city of the same grade as Fallen Dragon City, but it was quite far from Fallen Dragon City. Luo Yuncheng is very impressive. Even if your father comes today, I will make him admit that he is a beggar. Chu Yang's voice was still calm and indifferent, as if he was gambling in a casino. Although there was nothing, his tone was surprisingly loud. 1,600,000 yuan, 3,200,000 low-grade origin crystals. Before Chu Yang could finish his words, Zhong Ming immediately started to bid. He immediately sneered and said, beggar, can't you have some manners? I haven't finished speaking yet. Don't you have at least some manners? Chu Yang didn't pay any attention to the anger of the so-called Zhong Ming in the VIP box. His indifferent voice was filled with sarcasm and anger. I'm talking about 1,600,000 upper-grade crystals. Listen carefully, it's upper-grade crystals. You beggars' ears better listen carefully. If you don't have money to pay later, go find your father, that beggar. 1,600,000 high-grade essence crystals, this was considered a large sum. The entire auction house was in an uproar. They looked at Chu Yang in disbelief. What was especially shocking was that Chu Yang had called the city lord of Luoyun City a beggar. This was a direct slap to the face. Is this young man crazy? Is he trying to offend the city lord of Luoyun City? Maybe he has a grudge against the city lord of Luoyun City and wants to embarrass Luoyun City today. Chapter 60. The battle between Chu Yang and Zhong Ming had reached its climax. Blood was almost shed from the bayonet. Discussions broke out in the auction house. Someone sighed and said, "Don't provoke or offend people here. If you're not careful, you might offend a giant crocodile." Zhong Ming is in a dilemma now. It's hard for him not to bid now. Otherwise, he'll end up with the reputation of a beggar. The governor of Luoyun City will probably be called a beggar in the future. That's right. There are all kinds of people in this auction house. Does he think he's in Luoyun City? This Zhong Ming is indeed arrogant. He ridiculed others as beggars and deliberately humiliated others when bidding. Anyone with a temper wouldn't be able to tolerate him. As the saying went, the barefooted are not afraid of those with shoes. This was Chu Yang's mentality. Do you dare to state your name? As soon as Zhong Ming spoke, Chu Yang sneered. You don't deserve to know my name. Bang! The wooden mallet in the hands of the green-robed elder fell. He finally intervened and said in a dignified voice, "Silence. The broken Buddha statue is bidding for 1.6 million high-grade origin crystals. Is there anyone else who wants to bid? 320, young master, calm down. Don't let your emotions affect your decisions." In the VIP box, there was a faint voice of obstruction. After that, the voice could not be heard clearly. After a while, there was another angry voice from the box. 1.7 million high-grade origin crystals. Chu Yang immediately sneered again. Who are you calling a beggar? Why don't you dare to double the price? I'll bid 1.8 million. 1.9 million, 2 million. 2.1 million. 2,200,000. 2.3 million. After Chu Yang bid, he sneered again. How does it feel to be a beggar? How does it feel? Does it feel good? I'm the same as what you did to me just now. Now, it's no more and no less. Every time, it's 100,000 more. You, Zhong Ming, who was in the VIP box, was fuming with rage. His voice seemed to be gnashing his teeth as he said, 250,000. Chu Yang suddenly sneered, "Beggar, you still want to return it? Every time you give me an extra 200,000 yuan? Dream on. Do you think I'm an idiot like you? Today, you won't be able to escape the title of a beggar in Luo Yuncheng. I'll pay 4 million. 4 million. He directly offered 4 million yuan. This number was too large. Even the city lord of Luo Yun City would feel the pinch for a while. The entire auction house was in an uproar. Many people couldn't help but size up Chu Yang again. The more they cared about his identity, the more inexplicable they became. He's only at the peak of the 6th level of the primitive martial realm. How dare he go against Luo Yuncheng? You can't be pretending. You're just pretending. Pretending? You must be joking. Who would have the guts to come to the Sunset Merchant Guild and even offend Luo Yuncheng? Do you think someone without any status would dare? Chu Yang remained calm and collected, as if he did not care about the 3 million high-grade origin crystals at all. He was going to buy a joke from the city lord of Luo Yun City. "Young master, could it be that you've been tricked by him?" An old man's voice came from the VIP box. This made Chu Yang's heart skip a beat, and he almost exploded. This was 4 million pieces of upper-grade primordial crystals. If the other party admitted defeat, he would really be blind, and he wouldn't even have a place to die if he died. Chapter 61. Beggar, if you can't afford to bid, then don't bid anymore. You have to know your place. I believe that your father, the city lord, would rather be a beggar than spend so much money. Therefore, I can guarantee that if you dare to bid again, your father will beat you to death when you return. What a scammer. Everyone in the auction house looked at each other. In their opinion, if Chu Yang's identity was extraordinary, then Zhong Ming would really be scammed. Also, be at ease and be a beggar and a piece of trash. Chu Yang gave a thumbs up to Zhong Ming's private room. When we bid for the joy elixir later, I can clearly tell you that you won't be able to bid for a single joy elixir. I won't bid much more than you, just one more piece of low-grade essence crystal. I'll bid no matter how much you bid. Hooah! There was an uproar in the auction house again. They felt that this was Chu Yang's true purpose. The auction for the joy elixir hadn't started yet, and he was already using this to intimidate his competitors. He was telling them, I'm fucking rich. 4 million high-grade essence crystals to buy a broken Buddha statue. Just treat it as throwing it into the water to watch the splash. If you want to compete with me, then be careful. Don't be so surprised. I usually use money to smash people to death. Chu Yang grinned. He looked at Zhong Ming's private room and said again, also, you can rest assured. After we leave the auction house, I won't smash you to death with money. I'll just smash you until you're disabled for life. If I don't smash you until you're disabled for life, I won't be happy. He didn't seem to lack money at all. He looked like a super nouveau riche. He didn't have much, but he had a lot of money. Chu Yang's tone could be said to be extraordinarily big and also extraordinarily arrogant. He directly threatened Zhong Ming in the auction house. 4 million and 1 low-grade essence crystal. Zhong Ming spoke again, as if he wasn't scared at all. Suddenly, everyone's eyes looked at Chu Yang. Whether Chu Yang was like what he said, lacking in money, they would soon see the truth. At this time, many people were already excited. Interesting, very interesting. If you win, I won't follow. Chu Yang's sudden words caught everyone off guard. The entire auction house went silent. Everyone looked at Chu Yang in astonishment. Chu Yang was wearing a mask, so no one could see the smile on his face. However, they could see it from his tone: ridicule, sarcasm, disdain, and so on. Boom. After a brief moment of silence, the entire auction house boiled with excitement. The result was actually like this. The astonished people looked at Chu Yang in shock. It was as if all of them had been completely fooled by him. Surprise, there was only surprise, too much of a surprise. Chu Yang had acted very well just now. Hey, old man, why aren't you counting down? Aren't you afraid that the cooked duck will run away? When he urged the auctioneer, the entire auction house couldn't help but be stunned. You still have the leisure to care about this? Haha. However, it was immediately followed by a burst of laughter. Everyone finally understood what had happened. Chu Yang had completely fooled Zhong Ming and completely cheated him. He had cheated a total of 4 million high-grade origin crystals. That was a total of 400 high-grade origin crystals, which was almost the starting price of the joyous pill. I will kill you. Zhong Ming's furious and humiliated roar came from the private room. He had been treated as a fool in front of everyone. Not to mention that he had been fooled, he had even been cheated of 4 million high-grade origin crystals. He had lost all his face, and the entire Luoyun city would become a joke because of him. Kill me, you should make your move. It was like a mouse playing with a cat. This feeling made Chu Yang extremely happy. He was excited and felt that he hadn't had enough. He really wanted to play the mouse again, or stroke the tiger's whiskers and pull out the tiger's teeth. Beggar, are you very angry? Then I will make you even angrier. Voila! Chu Yang poured out all the low-grade origin crystals from his storage ring. Grandpa, I am indeed a fucking poor man. The total amount of low-grade origin crystals is less than 10,000 pieces. Grandpa will tell you all this now. What can you do if you are a fool? Come on, come and bite me. Chu Yang's tone and face were extremely hateful. Everyone was thinking that Zhong Ming, the son of the city lord of Luoyun City, would probably go crazy from anger. It was too stimulating and too infuriating. This grandson didn't even have a hair, but he had played Zhong Ming ruthlessly. In the end, He even told Zhongming the cruel truth. Chapter 62. Let go of me. I want to kill him. I must kill this bastard. Inside the box, Zhongming's furious voice came out, followed by a loud noise. It seemed that someone had stopped Zhongming, and then there was silence. What a pity. Why didn't that idiot rush out and kill me? Chu Yang's sigh made many people speechless again. Everyone, remember this absolute suppression in terms of intelligence. This scene will definitely become a legend in the future. Even someone as wise as me will become a legend. Legend, pooh, you shameless thing. Peng, peng, peng. The auctioneer could not watch any more, and the gavel fell heavily as he said, 4 million high-grade origin crystals and 1 low-grade origin crystal. This is now the highest price. Are there any other bidders? Who would continue to bid? Even the auctioneer didn't think that there would be anyone. He struck the gavel 3 times and directly announced, Honored guest room number 3 has bid for this Buddha statue with 4 million pieces of high-grade origin crystals and 1 piece of low-grade origin crystal. Honored guest room number 3, please come forward to receive your bid. A guard walked out and took the Buddha statue away. During this process, he stared fiercely at Chu Yang, and immediately stopped in his tracks, his whole body trembling. What a pity. I thought that idiot would come out and smash me to death with the Buddha statue, and then say confidently, beggar, it's just 4 million high-grade origin crystals, what can you do? I'll give it to you. Chu Yang sighed and shook his head, which made the guard so angry that he was about to explode. The key point was that Chu Yang was not done. The so-called Luo Yuncheng is just SOSO, without the least bit of magnanimity, taking revenge overnight. You're really too lame. After that, as if to express his disdain for Luo Yuncheng, people realized that Chu Yang had already stared at the auctioneer, and when he opened his mouth, everyone present almost fell over. I say, old mister, it's just a broken Buddha statue, and I've brought so much income to your Sunset Merchant Guild, shouldn't you give me a share? No matter what, I've worked hard, even if I didn't contribute. What did it mean to be audacious? This was audacious. He actually had designs on the Sunset Merchant Guild. Sir, don't look so speechless. Am I not telling the truth? The entire place fell silent again. They were completely speechless. How bold was this young man to provoke the Sunset Merchant Guild? Allow me to explain to you. Chu Yang counted with his fingers and said, First, I will help you earn 4 million pieces of high-grade origin crystals. Secondly, I'll show the Sunset Merchant Guild's signboard to everyone once again. Look, that fool is so angry that he's vomiting blood, but he doesn't dare to do anything. Otherwise, I could have blackmailed the Sunset Merchant Guild just now. How dare you have such an idea? Everyone only felt the rumbling of thunder. This time, they were really struck by lightning until they were charred on the outside and tender on the inside. They were completely convinced. However, if this matter was discussed in detail, it was not completely impossible. If the son of the city lord of Luoyun City made a move and injured this young man, the Sunset Merchant Guild would have no choice but to be blackmailed by him for the sake of the Sunset Merchant Guild signboard. Otherwise, if one's life was in danger when bidding in the Sunset Merchant Guild, and the person who made a move would not be punished, who would dare to come to the Sunset Merchant Guild? After understanding Chu Yang's train of thought, everyone instantly understood his great regret. That fool really disappoints me. He hasn't made a move even after being angered to this extent. I even suspect that there's something in his crotch. Isn't it just death? A scar as big as a bowl? He'll be a good man again in 18 years. A roar that sounded like a scream came from private room number 3. Everyone seemed to see blood spurting out of a young man's face. They also seemed to see his wounds being pulled open again and again, and salt being poured into them. They could completely imagine Zhongming's current feelings. He was mad with hatred, mad with shame, and mad with anger. Men, chase him out. The auctioneer was also quite angry. The atmosphere of the auction had been completely disrupted by Chu Yang, so he immediately gave the order. Chapter 63. The person who chased Chu Yang away did not pay any attention to him at all. Chu Yang struggled and shouted at the people in the auction house, Everyone, Don't just watch the show without doing anything. The auction house wants to kill me. Today, I will die outside. Tomorrow, it will be one of you. The way to kill you is to drag you out of the auction house. He continued to shout. The old auctioneer was speechless. This guy was too good at slandering people. If this guy died outside today, the reputation of their auction house would be tarnished. However, if this young man continued to cause trouble, the auction would not be able to continue. Everyone, if I don't die today, please remember to contact me. Contact code, Little Auction Expert, Make Auction House Weep Blood and Cry, Heavenly Martial Auction Expert 007. Finally, Chu Yang's voice disappeared. At this moment, someone suddenly said, I think the auction should be suspended after such a mess today. It will be held the next day. Immediately, someone shouted, 007, wait for me. The old auctioneer was in a mess. There was actually someone who believed the nonsense of that brat. However, he could not help but feel a little nervous. Based on the brat's ability to cause trouble just now, he might really have the ability to do so. The old auctioneer immediately slammed the gavel down. Bang! The second round of the auction house begins. I must kill him. I must kill that bastard. Not to mention others, in VIP box number 3, Zhongming's face was already ferocious and he was screaming hysterically. Young master, the joy pill is important. It won't be too late to kill him after we get the joy pill. Zhongming instantly roared, do you think I'm a fool? That bastard is wearing a mask. When the auction ends, where am I going to kill him? Do you think I'll kill all of you? The people at the side could not help but be speechless. Young master was not very muddle-headed just now. How did he suddenly become smart? Young master, don't worry. We've already sent people to keep an eye on that bastard. We'll definitely tear him into pieces. Very good. Give me that broken Buddha statue. Zhongming gritted his teeth and said ferociously, didn't that bastard want me to kill him with this broken Buddha statue? Then I'll satisfy him. The old man in the booth, who had been advising Zhongming, said again, young master, the joy pill is very important. If we split our forces when we bid for the joy pill, it would be easy for others to snatch it away. In fact, he did not finish his sentence. Especially after Zhongming had been completely played and humiliated, many people who originally revered Luoyun City would probably look down on them. They would definitely be tempted to make a move. It's just killing a 6th level origin martial realm, how many people do you need? Zhongming sneered, you old bastards, don't take me for a fool. It's enough that you're here. You'll only be a burden if you stay. After saying that, he roared angrily, all of you, follow me. Follow me to kill that bastard. The few old men in the booth frowned. However, they weighed the pros and cons. Although there were no Chi Soul Realm experts among the people who went out with Zhongming, they were at least at the 8th or 9th level of the origin martial realm. As such, dealing with a mere 6th level origin martial realm shouldn't be a problem. Thus, they didn't say anything to stop him. This could be considered a tacit agreement. After all, in their opinion, Chu Yang deserved to die. He actually dared to tease Luoyun City like this. Chapter 64. After Chu Yang was chased out of the auction house, he immediately left with a swoosh. He looked like he was running for his life, but his speed was not fast enough. I hope that idiot can bring the Buddha statue and smash me to death. For that Buddha statue, Chu Yang could be said to have racked his brains. He had deliberately humiliated Zhongming to the extreme and lured Zhongming to kill him, especially when he had deliberately mentioned that Zhongming would use the Buddha statue to smash him to death. This was very risky. If he could not escape, he would die without a doubt. The success rate was not high. Zhongming might not have the Buddha statue on him, or he might have a Chi Soul Realm expert following behind him. Everything would be a waste of effort. This could very well turn into a desperate escape for Chu Yang's life. After leaving the Sunset Merchant Association, Chu Yang deliberately used his perception and quickly sensed that someone was following him. This was normal. It would be abnormal if there was no one. In the auction house, he had humiliated Zhongming. If Zhongming did not kill him, how could he vent his anger? He quietly turned into an alley, causing the person following him to lose sight of him in a short period of time. Very quickly, just as Chu Yang's figure disappeared at the corner of the alley, a young man who looked like a guard appeared in front of him. However, he definitely did not expect that a sword was waiting for him. Oh, a strange sound came out of his throat. He tried to cover his bleeding throat with his hands, but he didn't have the strength to do so. His eyes were filled with fear and disbelief as he looked at Chu Yang. Then, he fell to the ground with a loud bang. A person at the peak of the 6th level of the origin martial realm had no chance of winning against a person at the 8th or 9th level of the origin martial realm. Shouldn't he be scared out of his wits and flee for his life? This bastard actually dared to counterattack. Even in death, this person did not expect the result to be like this. He also did not expect that Chu Yang's sword would be so fast, vicious, and ruthless. It killed him in one strike without any room for struggle. Since he was unprepared, the success rate was naturally very high. Furthermore, even if Chu Yang faced him head-on, relying on the strength of 2 elephants and a half, he would still be able to kill him alone. Chu Yang quickly took off his mask and changed into a new set of clothes after he killed the person who had been following him with the wind-chasing life-snatching sword. After spending so much effort, he naturally did not leave. He found a corner and waited there for Zhongming's arrival. In a very short time, he heard a burst of hurried footsteps. Soon after, 5 figures appeared in Chu Yang's pupils. The leader of the group was a 16 or 17-year-old youth. His body was thin and weak, his eyes were sunken, and there were obvious traces of excessive drinking on his face. He was only at the 4th level of the origin martial realm. The other 4 looked like guards. 3 of them were at the peak of the 9th level of the origin martial realm and 1 was at the peak of the 8th level of the origin martial realm. Without a Chi Soul realm expert, there was no hope. Chu Yang was overjoyed. He didn't mind at all. The other party had completely underestimated him. If he didn't underestimate him, he wouldn't have a chance. The question was this really Zhongming? Did he bring the Buddha statue with him? Chu Yang was not sure. But looking at the youth in the lead, Chu Yang felt that only this kind of playboy would be in urgent need of a joyous pill. Young master, looking at Asai's expression before he died, he should have been ambushed and stabbed to death. He died not long ago, so that bastard must not have escaped far. A middle-aged man among the 5 touched Asai's neck and felt his body temperature, so he made an accurate judgment. Immediately split up, I will chase. I must catch that bastard. Zhongming's sunken eye sockets exploded with a burst of extremely vicious light. Chapter 65. The moment he saw the Buddha statue, the Mahamayuri scripture in Chu Yang's body had a strange movement and crazily revolved. However, he did not dare to immediately make a move. He was confident that he could deal with 1 peak 9th level origin martial realm, but 3 peak 8th level origin martial realm and 1 peak 8th level origin martial realm, he should not be a match for them. Young master, once we separate, we will not be able to protect young master. Zhonghua, stay. Zhongming was afraid that Chu Yang would escape, so he immediately roared, don't talk nonsense, immediately chase him. If that bastard escapes, I will take your heads to vent my anger. These bodyguards knew Zhongming very well. If he vented his anger on them, they might really have their heads chopped off by Zhongming. So, they didn't dare to hesitate any longer. Only one of them was left behind. Then, they scattered in all directions to chase after Chu Yang. That's great, there's nothing better. It's simply wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search and finding it without any effort. Seeing this scene, Chu Yang's nerves tensed up and he was extremely excited. This was the best opportunity. If he could not grasp it, then he could not hope for anything else. This noble, young master, are you looking for the murderer who killed this big brother? Chu Yang estimated that the 4 people had already left and immediately walked out from the shadows. He tried his best to change his voice and pretended to be extremely scared as he spoke to Zhongming. You know where he is. Zhongming grabbed Chu Yang and his eyes burst out with joy and hatred. But Zhonghua, who was at the side, felt that this person's voice was somewhat familiar and could not help but carefully search his mind. But when he was distracted, he felt a sharp wind blowing towards his throat, like a needle piercing his throat. Not good. He was shocked, but at this time, it was already too late. He felt a sharp pain and clearly felt something sharp piercing his throat. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the extremely frightened youth who could not even speak clearly. Before he died, he finally understood why this voice was so familiar. Unfortunately, it was too late. Wind chasing life reaping sword, the sword is faster than the wind. When you feel the wind, you are already a dead man. Bang! Zhongming was also sent flying by a huge force. Chu Yang's main target was the bodyguard Zhonghua, who was at the 9th level of the origin martial realm. But when he burst out with his full strength, the strength of 2.5 elephants, how could Zhongming resist? He was sent flying like a ragbag. As for influencing Chu Yang to make a move, there was no need to talk about it. Zhongming was not at that level yet. In front of Chu Yang, he was like a chicken or a duck. While Zhongming was still in shock, Chu Yang took a step forward and similarly pierced his throat with his sword. His hands and feet did not stop moving at an extremely fast speed. Chu Yang first took the Buddha statue from Zhongming's hand, then immediately took off his storage ring. Then, he plundered the body of the guard at the peak of the 9th layer of the origin martial realm. Without seeing what he had obtained, he immediately left. In the blink of an eye, Chu Yang had disappeared without a trace. He found a place, and hurriedly changed his clothes. Then, he immediately left the city. Without stopping, in addition to his mental state being extremely tense, the Mahamayuri King scripture in his body had almost reached the peak of madness. Suddenly, he felt a 5-colored light fly out from his storage ring and directly enter his body. It's that Buddha statue. That Buddha statue was placed in his storage ring. Chu Yang never thought that the attraction between the two would be so strong. There seemed to be something in the Buddha statue that directly flew out of the storage ring and entered his body. Chapter 66. In the afternoon, Chu Yang left the fallen dragon city. His tense nerves were completely relaxed. It was not the first time he killed someone. In the Coiling Dragon mountain range, he had killed Zhao Yunhu, but the level was completely different. Zhongming was the son of the Luoyun city lord. Once he died, the entire fallen dragon city would be shaken. Now that he was out, he did not need to pay attention to these people. 10 low-grade yuanjing to buy a mask was really worth it. Just like selling masks, killing people and setting fire to make a golden belt. Chu Yang was not worried at all. After killing Zhongming, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack for Luoyun city to find him. Boom. Chu Yang sat down cross-legged in a mountain forest. The real qi in his body surged violently. It seemed as if countless tsunamis had been set off. His real qi had gone completely out of control. The aura that erupted from his body formed a gale, and dispersed the surrounding air. Bang 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 bang. 6 explosive sounds came out from Chu Yang's body. With each sound, his body trembled violently. Blood flowed out from his mouth and nose. In his Dantian Qi Si, the 6 5-colored lotus platforms that he had condensed exploded one by one in an instant. At the same time, the true Qi began to condense on its own again. Soon, it condensed into a 5-colored cloud. This was the Mahamayuri Sutra that Chu Yang had cultivated before his previous life's memory was awakened. At this moment, he had completely fallen back to his original place. What is going on? Could it be that the genius martial spirit's deduction was wrong? Impossible. Chu Yang's heart was also in a state of shock. He had never expected such a change. Instead of advancing, he retreated. 1 5-colored cloud. 2 5-colored clouds. 3 5-colored clouds. The Mahamayuri scripture was operating at the same time as the 5-colored clouds were continuously condensing in his body. It was also crazily absorbing the vital energy between the heaven and the earth. The surrounding wind was blowing non-stop, and was making whooshing sounds. Endless vital energy of the heaven and the earth was gushing in from all directions, and was absorbed into his body. 4 5-colored clouds. 5 5-colored clouds. 6 5-colored clouds. In an instant, 9 5-colored clouds were condensed in Chu Yang's body, and he was at the peak of the 9th level of the primitive martial realm. Such a change completely confused him, but the change was still fierce. With a loud bang, the 9 5-colored clouds suddenly collided with each other, causing Chu Yang's body to shake violently once again. His entire body seemed to be in a trance, like the raging waves in a vast ocean. He felt a sweet taste in his throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. Before he could react, the 5-colored lotus throne that had exploded in his Dantian's Qi formed once more. A 5-colored lotus throne, 2 5-colored lotus thrones, 3 5-colored lotus thrones. In the blink of an eye, 9 5-colored lotus thrones were formed. Once again, he was at the peak of the 9th level of the primitive martial realm. At this moment, Chu Yang was like riding a roller coaster. His cultivation level fluctuated greatly, making people dumbfounded. From the 1st level of the primitive martial realm to the 9th level, it changed back and forth. Boom! Chu Yang's body suddenly shook violently again. The 9 5-colored lotus thrones, like the previous 9 5-colored clouds, also bombarded together. Suddenly, there was a misty chaos, and a figure appeared from within. A golden Buddha seemed to be tens of thousands of feet tall, sitting in a 5-colored golden lotus, surrounded by 5-colored clouds. Behind him, countless peacock feathers that seemed to be tens of thousands of feet long opened like a folding fan. It was dazzling, majestic, solemn, and awe-inspiring. The Mahamayuri Sutra. Chu Yang was shocked. He actually condensed the Mahamayuri Sutra. Chapter 67. Moyuli, Jilan Emperor, Sahaha. The Mahamayuri Dharma Laksana was very unstable, as if it had encountered a Buddha. When it was in danger, it chanted, "Not enough true chi." Chu Yang instantly woke up. Previously, he was only at the peak of primitive martial realm level 6. Now, even though he had fallen to primitive martial realm level 1, his true chi was still far from enough to condense the Mahamayuri Dharma Laksana. He hurriedly took out the Yuanjing from his storage ring and saw Zhongming's storage ring. He immediately checked and found that there were more than 100 spiritual crystals in it. He hurriedly took the spiritual crystals in his hand. There was spiritual chi in the spiritual chi, which was a high-level energy. It was the best to use it to replenish true chi. However, he could only absorb the spiritual chi in the spiritual crystals. Otherwise, it would be impossible. For Chu Yang, spiritual energy was like a knife or a sword. If he swallowed it, his intestines would be pierced or his stomach would be pierced. Once absorbed, he would immediately die. Whoosh! Chu Yang held the spirit crystal in his hand. Suddenly, he felt as if he had swallowed a ray of light from the spirit crystal into his body. Then, the spirit crystal lost its luster in an instant. Then, it disintegrated and turned into powder. Hiss! Chu Yang could not help but gasp. This was too terrifying. A spiritual crystal could be used for at least a month by a martial artist in the primitive martial realm. However, he had consumed a spiritual crystal in an instant. It was as if an ant had eaten a giant elephant in an instant. It was too scary. Chu Yang himself was scared. So I have heard. The Mahamayuri Dharma Laksana had finally stabilized and the second Dharma Laksana was also condensing. However, his true chi was not enough. This really scared Chu Yang. That was just a spiritual crystal. There was no way to care so much. Chu Yang hurriedly absorbed the spiritual crystal again. The situation of an ant eating an elephant appeared again. As soon as the spiritual crystal fell into his hand, the spiritual chi in it was immediately absorbed. In the blink of an eye, the 100 spiritual crystals in Zhongming's storage ring were all consumed by Chu Yang. At this time, he had only managed to condense 5 Mahamayuri Dharma Laksana in his body. The 6th Mahamayuri Dharma Laksana had yet to be formed. In the end, Chu Yang had devoured all the Yuanjing in his body. Only then did the 6th Mahamayuri Dharma Laksana take shape and stabilize. It was impossible for him to condense the 7th Mahamayuri Dharma Laksana. TSK. Mo Yu Li, Jilan Di, Sapohi. Chu Yang recited the incantation unconsciously. In an instant, he seemed to have turned into Mahamayuri, showing the appearance of 3 faces and 8 hands. Of course, those were just illusions, but it was already shocking enough. After an unknown amount of time, everything finally stabilized. From beginning to end, Chu Yang was unable to sense the 5-colored brilliance that entered his body, which made him very surprised. Forget it, let me feel the changes first. After devouring more than 100 spiritual crystals and yuanjing, I have become a pauper again. Please don't disappoint me. When Chu Yang thought of so many spiritual crystals and yuanjing, he felt a pang of pain. Apart from the 9,000 yuanjing that he had obtained at least 100,000 upper-grade yuanjing from Zhongming's storage ring. He had devoured all of them. The Mahamayuri Sutra was simply a bottomless pit. Chu Yang's heart was still aching. Apart from the bottomless pit that was the Mahamayuri Sutra, there was another important reason, which was Zhongming. Zhongming should not have had so many yuanjing and spiritual crystals. However, he had cheated him of 4 million yuanjing. How much more could Zhongming have? Therefore, at this time, he wanted to slap himself. 4 million upper-grade yuanjing. That was a total of 4 million upper-grade yuanjing. Boom. Chapter 68. He was simply scared out of his wits. That punch just now had caused the 9 elephants to roar at the same time, and 9 barbarian elephants' phantoms appeared behind him at the same time. The power of 9 elephants, the power of 9 elephants. How was this possible? How could he have such shocking power? An ordinary 9th-level Chi Soul Realm martial artist only had the power of 9 elephants. Origin Martial Third Transformation. Suddenly, he thought of a legend, Origin Martial Third Transformation. The so-called Origin Martial Third Transformation was to cultivate from the 1st level to the 9th level of the Origin Martial Realm. After that, one would have to cultivate 3 times consecutively. Just like the 5-colored clouds and the 5-colored lotus platform in Chu Yang's body, and the great peacock Dharma idol. The difficulty of the Origin Martial Third Transformation was extremely high. First of all, after the 9th level of the Origin Martial Realm, how to return to the 1st level of the Origin Martial Realm? Basically, very few people could do this, and this was only one of the difficulties. There were many more, such as the time needed for the third transformation was too long. Chu Yang felt that he had stepped into the legendary Origin Martial Third Transformation. The Origin Martial Third Transformation was said to be the most solid and perfect foundation of martial arts. This was because the third transformation coincided with the 3 talents of heaven, earth, and man. 1 gave birth to 2, 2 gave birth to 3, and 3 gave birth to all things. It also coincided with the 3 realms, heavenly court, human realm, and hell. The Origin Martial Third Transformation had great benefits for future martial arts cultivation. As for the specifics, Chu Yang did not know. However, he was very clear about one thing. After the Origin Martial Third Transformation, one could erupt with 3 times the power, 3 times the speed, 3 times the perception, and 3 times the perception. Everything could erupt with 3 times the coefficient. With this, Chu Yang completely understood the power of 9 elephants. Originally, he had the power of 2.5 elephants. After the great peacock Dharma idol was condensed, his power increased by half an elephant, which meant that he had the power of 3 elephants. 3 times the power was 9 elephants. Chu Yang closed his eyes and suddenly sensed. He found that the range of his detection had indeed increased by a lot. Sure. Once he used the great 1,000-leaf steps, he felt that his body was uncontrollably rushing forward. His speed was obviously much faster than before. It was definitely 3 times faster, and there was more than enough. Such a speed was too fucking shocking. Most people in the Chi Soul realm would not be able to catch up to him. 3 times the power, 3 times the speed, 3 times the perception, 3 times the perception. It really is the third cycle of the Origin Martial Realm. Everything can be increased by 3 times. As Chu Yang sensed this, he could not help but indulge in the power he had just obtained. His eyes suddenly lit up. This harvest is really too shocking. Just for this origin martial third transition, it would be worth it to offend Luo Yun or even the Sunset City Lord. Everything that he had now could be unleashed at 3 times the normal rate. This made Chu Yang feel like he was in a dream. If he could unleash 3 times the normal rate, he felt like he could easily kill an ordinary Chi Soul Realm martial artist. Just as he was lost in his thoughts, an extreme sense of weakness suddenly surged in his heart, startling him. Third cycle of the origin martial realm, erupting with 3 times the power. There are repercussions. Chu Yang was slightly stunned, but he soon understood. The eruption of the origin martial realm's third cycle was 3 times the normal, and the consumption was enormous. It could be said to be extremely terrifying. He had just tested it, and now he felt extremely weak. It was as if he had used his genius martial spirit. His mental power, physical strength, and Jin Qi had all been exhausted. However, such an outcome was natural and completely acceptable. The effect of 3 times the normal power was too great. Not only could it allow him to kill enemies of a higher realm, it could even save his life and escape in times of danger. Such an ability was something that others could not obtain even if they begged for it. Such a side effect was nothing. However, Chu Yang was still greedy in the end. He felt that it was a pity. If only there were no side effects to erupting with 3 times the normal power. Then I would really be invincible. How could there be such a thing in the world? No matter what, Chu Yang's strength had increased by a lot after reaching the 3rd cycle of the origin martial realm. The greatest harvest from this trip to Fallen Dragon City was probably this origin martial 3rd cycle. Everything else could not compare. Chapter 69. Chu Yang found a relatively safe place, adjusted his breathing, and recovered to his peak state. Only then did he start to carefully take stock of the loot he had obtained from killing this time. There was no need to think about the crystals and spirit crystals. Zhongming's storage ring was naturally the most important. The majority of the loot was here. However, when Chu Yang took a closer look inside, he couldn't help but curse out loud. These are all broken things. Apart from dealing with women, they are useless. Apart from women, this grandson Zhongming has nothing else in his mind. Chu Yang couldn't help but admit that this brother Zhongming was amazing. Inside the storage ring, there were colorful things like women's undergarments, underwear, and so on. As long as it was a woman's body, he had everything he needed. There were also many medicinal pills like good boy water, 7 times a night, and so on. They were not in bottles, but in piles, piles after piles. Of course, inside the storage ring, there were all kinds of fighting techniques, secret techniques, and so on. Chu Yang only took a glance and came to a conclusion: Zhongming was a professional. Even in his previous life, Chu Yang felt that the professional in this field was far inferior to this brother. In any case, he dared to guarantee that if a woman fell into the hands of this brother Zhongming, Zhongming would definitely be able to play with her like a flower. Moreover, the flower would definitely not be the same. After this, Chu Yang's eyes finally lit up. He finally saw the cute divine accumulation pills, chi-generating pills, and Yushan pills. They were also piled up into piles. It could be said that there were a lot of them. So many that it was enough for Chu Yang to use for a period of time without worrying. Haha. Chu Yang couldn't help but laugh out loud. Sure enough, one can't get rich without a windfall. Killing people is the best way to get rich. To be honest, he now had the impulse to kill a few more Zhao Yunhu or Zhongming. As long as he killed one of them, these medicinal pills and crystals would come too quickly. From the many items in Zhongming's storage ring, Chu Yang could completely see the epitome of Zhongming's life: cultivation, eating, fighting, women, eating, everything was elixir, only elixir. In addition to these medicinal pills, there were also 2 other types of medicinal pills: the Berserk pill and the Demon Transformation pill. These 2 types of medicinal pills were definitely used to put one's life on the line. After that, Chu Yang had the urge to curse again. This brother's storage ring actually contained not a single martial skill, not a single mental cultivation method. This was simply too extreme. He had reached the pinnacle of perfection, just like how he had reached the pinnacle of perfection in terms of women. Perhaps, the mental cultivation method that this grandson cultivates is extremely impressive. It is only passed down orally and not in writing. Chu Yang found such a good excuse for Zhongming. On the contrary, the two bodyguards that Chu Yang had killed were reliable. Other than the qi-generating pills, spirit-nurturing pills, and spirit-accumulating pills, there were also detoxification pills, healing pills, and other medicinal pills. There were also many cultivation methods. Vajra Fist, Wild Goose Technique, 5 Ghosts Arts, 5 Ghost Steps, 18 Demonic Styles, and so on. Chu Yang took a fancy to the cultivation method of the 5 Ghosts category. This cultivation method not only had the cultivation method of the origin martial realm, it even had the 5 Ghosts visualization diagram for the Qi Soul realm. In addition, there were 2 other cultivation methods that Chu Yang was also very concerned about, the Golden Emperor Technique and the Thousand Faces Technique. The Golden Emperor Technique was a metal-attributed cultivation method. It greatly enhanced Chu Yang's sword arts, but this Golden Emperor Technique was severely damaged. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.